My name's Jack. I'm 34 years old, an archaeologist by trade. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. It's a hell of a job, right? It is. Beats the office cubicles and fluorescent lights I used to rot under. Used to be one of those guys in stiff shirts and blue light glasses, shuffling papers and running in circles, chasing promotions that didn't mean anything. Did that for a long time. About 5 years, actually. Academia is like that. You get stuck. See, the thing about studying ancient history is it's all fascinating until you're stuck inside a gray building talking about it instead of being out there digging it up with your own two hands. That was the reason I got into this in the first place. I wasn't built to sit still. I got good grades, sure, really good ones. Best in my department, actually. I wrote papers on pre-dynasty pottery forms and the ancient period like they were gospel. But the whole time, I just kept thinking about sand, dust, heat, the sting of the desert sun behind my eyes. I wanted to feel history, not just talk about it. So after I got my doctorate, I walked out of Oxford and I didn't look back. That's when I made the leap. Egypt had always called to me. Something about the place never let go once it got into my head. Maybe it was the movies. Brendan Fraser's The Mummy came out when I was still a kid. And man, that thing lit me on fire. I must have watched it 24 times. Something about the danger and the mystery. The tombs hidden for centuries, waiting to be disturbed. It never felt scary to me exactly. It felt right. Like I was supposed to be there. So I saved up, sold some stuff, packed a backpack, and moved to Cairo. Didn't even tell half the people in my life. There wasn't anything left back home I couldn't live without. So I started out small, joining local digs as a volunteer. Turns out it's easy to find work if you know what you're doing and you're willing to sweat. Egypt's full of ruins and relics, and every university or museum wants a piece of it. I didn't mind being the guy holding the brush at first. Being in the field was enough. But it didn't take long before I started leading my own teams, taking over small sites, collecting samples for research institutions. You earn your stripes one pottery shard at a time. Eventually, I started guiding tours too. Part-time gig, mostly during the summer when the families fled in with their cameras and big hats, looking to touch history with their own hands. It's easy money. Honestly, it's fun. You get to see the wonder in their faces when they look up at the pyramids for the first time. And I get to pretend I'm some kind of desert cowboy, walking them through the sands like I own the place. I throw in a little mythology, maybe a curse or two. Gets a laugh, gets a tip. Kids especially love my dog, Jet. Jet's a mutt, scrappy little black thing that looks like he was stitched together from spare parts. Bit my ankle the first time I met him. Literally ran up and clamped down on my leg like I owed him money. I don't know what made me take him in, but he's been mine ever since. Goes with me on every dig, every tour. Doesn't bark much, just sticks close and watches people. The kids call him Anubis. He's got a collar with a scarab beetle charm I picked up from a market in Giza. Nothing expensive, just a copper trinket. But it shines in the sun, and it makes him look like he belongs in a museum. Locals like him. Even the old men in the coffee shops nod at him like he's some kind of guardian. Superstitious bunch, but who am I to argue? If Jet wants to keep the spirits away, he is more than welcome to it. My days now usually mix of digging and walking people around in the heat. It's not glamorous work. You're sweating before breakfast, your back aches, and the sand gets everywhere. I mean everywhere. But it's good work. Honest work. You get up before the sun. You stretch out under a tarp while you sip hot tea. And then you get your hands dirty. You dig, you brush, You listen for the sound of stone under your tools, and sometimes, just sometimes, you find something incredible. That's the part that makes it all worth it. You hit something solid, and you don't know what it is yet. Your heart starts pounding, your fingers tremble just a little. You start brushing faster, careful but eager, and then there it is. A piece of pottery, an old coin, a fragment of bone, something no one's seen in 1,000 years. Something that belonged to a person who lived and died before your whole country was even an idea. It's humbling, makes you feel like a speck in the middle of something huge. And if you're lucky, you get to preserve it, document it, pass it on. That's the part I love the most. I'm not a spiritual guy, I'm not really, but there's something about preserving history that feels important, bigger than you. You're not just finding something, you're saving it, making sure it stays safe for people who haven't even been born yet. I like that. Of course, not all of it's fun. I have seen some things out here I don't have a name for. Egypt's old. I mean old. I don't think most people really understand that. This place has layers, like 100 civilizations stacked on top of each other, buried under the same sun. You dig in one spot, and you find a Roman floor. A foot deeper, you find a new kingdom burial site. Below that, you might find something even older. And the people here, they know. I'm telling you, they know things. Things they don't say out loud. They talk about old tombs like they're alive. They give names to the wind. They leave offerings at the wrong doors. I've learned not to ask too many questions, but I will tell you this. If you sit with the old-timers long enough, guys who've been doing this since before I was born, they'll talk, especially if there's a little rum in the bottle. They'll lean in real close, eyes squinting under the weight of the desert sun and the years, and they'll start to tell you stories. Some of them are funny. Some are just legends, but a few of them are different. Anyway, I've got stories, more than a few. Things I've seen, things I can't explain. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink. It's a cool night in Cairo and we're just getting started. My name's Jack, and I work in the ancient pyramids of Egypt. These are my stories. Let me tell you how I met Jet. Not the cute version I sometimes tell the tourist. The real version. The one I don't talk about much. It started in Cairo. I just started leading small digs on my own. Nothing big, just a few sites cleared by the ministry. Dry patches of land a few kilometers from the popular tombs, places the big universities had no time for. I liked it that way. Fewer rules, fewer people breathing down my neck. One afternoon, I stopped by a busy market. I wasn't shopping for anything in particular, just wandering through the alleys, picking through old crates of second-hand tools and brass trinkets. That's when I first saw him, Jet. He was small, scrawny little black dog, with patchy fur and ears too big for his head. He was chewing on the corner of a worn-out rug by a spice stand, growling like it insulted his mother. I walked past him, didn't think much of it, but the little guy followed me. I stopped near a fruit cart, and bam, he bit my ankle. Not hard. He didn't have real teeth yet, just little puppy gums and a few needle-point baby fangs. But it surprised the hell out of me. I turned around, and there he was, looking up at me like he'd won something, like I owed him now. I tried to shake it off, but he kept following me, right through the market, right to the truck. I didn't take him with me that day. I didn't even pet him. I just gave him a look and said, "Don't get yourself killed, little guy." I thought that'd be the end of it. But like I said, Jet had his own ideas. A week later, I was out at a dig site in the desert. Nothing impressive. Just a low ridge of rock and some old maps that suggested a minor burial shaft might be nearby. It was hot. My team had taken a break, back under the tents drinking warm soda and complaining about the flies. I should have been there with them. But I wasn't. Instead, I was climbing into a shaft we'd roped off earlier. We hadn't cleared it yet. Protocol said to wait, send down the sensor equipment, run a stability check. But I wanted a look. Just a quick one. The shaft was narrow, barely shoulder width, and steep. Dust slipped under my boots. My hand clung to the rope like it was the only thing keeping me on the planet. About 10 feet down, I found a ledge and eased onto it, shining my headlamp into the dark. The walls were cut stone, tight and rough. Looked like a worker's tunnel. No inscriptions, no paint, just plain limestone. I took one step forward, and that's when the floor gave out. My left foot sank straight through, and my body dropped like a sack of bricks. I fell maybe 6 or 7 feet, landed hard. My ankle twisted under me like a rope pulled the wrong way. Pain shot up my leg, hot and sharp. I tried to stand and couldn't. The flashlight clattered beside me, still on, still spinning its weak beam around the pit. And then I heard it. A dry, skittering sound. The beam of light caught movement. Dozens of black shapes curling out of cracks in the stone. Scorpions. Thick-bodied, shiny things with claws. They were slow at first. Then one hissed, and the rest came alive. I tried not to move. And then, a sound from above. A bark. Jet? He was up there. I don't know how he got out to the site. Maybe he'd followed the scent of the truck. Maybe he'd been trailing me for days, but there he was. And then he jumped. I saw him fall through the air like a rock in a storm, legs flailing, ears pinned back. He hit the pit with a yelp and landed right beside me. Then, before I could even yell, he was on them. Now, Jet was a puppy. He wasn't even a proper dog yet. But he moved like a wild thing. He tore through those scorpions with teeth and claws and wild snarls, knocking them away from me. Biting, shaking, spinning in the dust. I tried to help, used the broken flashlight to swat at a few that got too close. Somewhere above, I heard shouting. Someone must have heard the barking. Ropes were being lowered. A teammate, Adam, I think, dropped into the pit and started dragging us out. I was half limping, half carried. Jet was still growling, his fur matted and speckled with cuts. We got pulled out of the dark. The light hit us, and I remember squinting at the sun like it was the first time I'd seen it. Then, just before they got us to the tent, I looked back into the shaft one more time, and I saw something. Down there, in the far end of the tunnel, beyond where the light could really reach, I saw something watching. 2 red dots that blinked once before continuing to stare at us. I didn't say anything at the time, but I've never forgotten that. We were rushed to medical after that. I got x-rays, a proper wrap of my ankle. It was just a sprain, but they made me stay off it for a few days. I got the usual lecture. Don't go down shafts alone, don't break protocol, don't be an idiot. All fair. But I kept looking at Jet. He was curled up in the corner of the tent, bandaged and muddy, but breathing. His eyes were half closed. He looked like a coyote pup, wild and half broken, but proud, like he knew what he'd done. I asked the medic how much it cost to get him all the usual stuff, shots, checkups, whatever dogs needed out here. The guy looked at me like I was crazy. "He's not even yours," he said. "He is now," I told him. That night, I went back into Cairo, limped through the same market, bought a leather collar from an old woman who didn't speak much English. It had a scarab charm on the front, worn bronze with a little crack down the center. I slipped it around Jet's neck when I got back to the tent, and he has never left my side since. Now, not every story is nice. Some of them crawl back into your thoughts when you're lying awake at night, staring at the roof of your tent, wondering what exactly you saw and why it still doesn't make sense. This one's like that. I'd been in Egypt a couple of years by then. Long enough to speak some of the language, long enough to stop calling myself a tourist. I had sand in my boots, paperwork in my truck, and scars on both hands from broken pottery and old tools. I knew the job, but I didn't know everything. I was addicted to strange tales, the old kind, legends. You can always find one if you knew where to look, especially after dark. The men in the bars told them like spooky stories, hands waving in the smoke, half of them laughing, half of them dead serious. The market vendors would whisper them while selling you dates or trinkets. Everyone had a cousin or a cousin's friend who saw something. I collected them like trading cards, but I didn't believe any of them. Not really. Not until the day I got sick. I picked up lunch at a roadside stall on the south end of town. I don't even remember what it was. Some kind of spiced meat wrapped in flatbread. Tasted fine at the time. I even tipped the guy. But 2 hours later, I was outside the site perimeter, hunched over in the sand, dry heaving until my ribs hurt. I thought I was dying. My throat was dry, my skin burning under the sun. I remember trying to get up and failing. Just folded back down on my hands and knees, sweating like a pig. Then I heard footsteps behind me. A voice. "Doris the Belly, you're not dying." I looked up, and there it was. This old guy with a gold tooth and a head wrap too clean for the weather. He had a crooked walking stick and one thick eyebrow that looked like it could bench press me. He squatted down beside me like it was nothing. I didn't answer him, just coughed into the sand. He waited a minute. Then he pulled out a thermos and poured me a cup of mint tea, held it out without saying anything. I took it. The man's name was Malik. We sat there until my stomach stopped trying to kill me. I kept sipping the tea, and he kept cracking jokes. Dumb ones. Stuff about how everyone breaks the first week, and this is why real Egyptians eat dirt before bread. He laughed at all his own jokes. Jet curled up near my boots and slept. I don't know why, but I liked Malik right away. There was something easy about him, like he'd already survived everything worth fearing. A few days later, we were back out at a dig. The ministry had opened a sealed chamber next to one of the lesser pyramids, and I needed someone local to help me move debris and watch the site. I asked Malik if he wanted the job. He said he was free, and that was that. We entered the chamber in the morning. It was cool inside, the kind of cool that only happens when sunlight hasn't touched stone in centuries. The air smelled like dried leaves and old cloth. I had my flashlight. Malik had his thermos. At first, it was empty, just cracked stone and dust. But as we cleared the center of the room, we found bones arranged in a weird pattern, laid out in a circle around a large figure to be exact. The bones weren't all human. Some were animal, long and bent, shaped like they came from creatures that didn't live in this part of the world. Hyena, maybe. Or lion. Hard to say. But in the center, there was a skeleton with a lion's skull resting on its neck like a helmet. The teeth were too clean, too white. Malik muttered something under his breath. A prayer. I don't know which one. And then the ground started shaking. It was sudden. No warning. Just a deep rumble that knocked my knees out from under me. Jet barked like he lost his mind, pacing in a tight circle behind us. It felt like a sudden earthquake. I dropped to the ground and covered my head. My flashlight rolled away. Stone dust rained down from the ceiling. Malik crawled over to the bones with one hand. And then, right there in the middle of the chaos, he poured his tea right onto the lion's skull. The moment the liquid hit the bone, something changed. The shaking stopped. The skull cracked in half with a dry sound. The ground went still again. Silence. Malik sat back on his heels and wiped his forehead. I stared at him, then at the broken skull, then back at him. You want to tell me what just happened? I asked. Booby trap. Old one, he said. Like it was obvious? Okay, that's not how booby traps work, man. That's not how any of it works, I said, wiping my brow before checking on my dog. He shrugged. Legend says if you enter a holy chamber without permission, you'll meet a violent end. Only way to avoid it is to have tea with the king. I blinked at him. Tea with the king. So, the tea... He pointed at the bones. That was the king. I whistled. Hell of a tradition. We sat in the chamber for a while longer. I started documenting the layout, measuring the bone lengths, taking photos. My hands were steady again, but my head wasn't. I kept looking at that broken skull, the way it cracked clean down the middle. Jet refused to come near it. Later, I filed a report, gave the officials the cleaned up version, told them about the bones, left out the earthquake and the tea. I don't think they would have believed me anyway. But that night, I went back into town and started asking questions. Real questions. Because that was the moment I realized the stories weren't just stories. Not here. Not in Egypt. They were warnings. Well, by now, I work digs. Real work. Sweat, sand, research. But like I said before, I also run tours. And I love it. I get to walk tourists through ancient tombs and talk about mummies, pharaohs, curses, all the good stuff. The kids are the best part. They look at me like I'm Brendan Fraser in The Mummy, or Indiana Jones with a sunburn. They ask a million questions, and some of them actually listen when I answer. It's a break from the serious work. Makes the long hours hunched over stone worth it. Now, most days go fine. Some sunburns, some laughs, some selfies. People go home happy. But not this one. I remember the heat that morning. Sharp and dry, not the humid kind. We were doing a tour. Small group, maybe 15 people. Some older couples, 2 teachers from Boston, and one family with a 10-year-old kid named Milo. Milo was the type who didn't stop moving. You know the kind. Fidgety. Had a little adventure hat on, like he came out of a cereal box. Smart, too. Asked about the symbols on the wall before we even reached the entrance. I liked him. The tour started like usual. I walked him through the outer halls, explained the burial customs, pointed out the ancient graffiti scratched into the stone by workers a few thousand years ago. Everyone was hot and sweating, but smiling. We were halfway into the temple complex when I started doing a head count. That's a habit I picked up early. Dig sites are dangerous, even the ones made safe for tourists. One wrong turn, and you're alone in a maze. I counted once, twice, and Milo was gone. I didn't panic. Not yet. Kids wander off. He probably saw a cat or a weird bug. I called his name. No answer. I asked the parents if he'd said anything. They looked pale, like they knew their kid was the type to do something very stupid. And that's when I felt the fur brush past my leg. Jet? He was already stiff in the ground, tail still, eyes locked. He let out a soft bark and took off down a narrow hall, one we hadn't walked the group through. I followed. The hallway dipped down, away from the cool parts of the temple, and into something older. The walls here weren't cleaned up for tourists. The paintings were chipped. There were spider webs in the corners. At the end of the hall, I saw light. And Milo. He was standing inside a small chamber, barely wider than my bedroom back in Cairo. His little hand was wrapped around a thin wire. One of the old trip systems that thieves used to trigger back in the day. But this one wasn't fake. It worked. The sarcophagus in the center of the room slid open with a dry scrape. The lid cracked, and a long wrapped figure began to rise out of it. I didn't think. I didn't blink. I shouted the kid's name, and he turned around, frozen. The mummy lifted one bandaged leg over the edge of the coffin, slow but steady, like it had all the time in the world. Its head tilted toward the boy. You could still see the sockets where the eyes used to be. Jet. Guard, I said. Jet lunged between Milo and the coffin, teeth bared, growling low. I was already digging through my backpack. I pulled out my bug spray, standard DEET stuff for the desert bugs. Then I grabbed my lighter, flicked it. A thin stream of fire caught the mummy full in the chest. It jerked. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran in, scooped Milo into my arms, and backed out of that room as fast as I could, Jet on our heels. I didn't stop until we were back in the main hall, out in the light, surrounded by confused tourists and one furious set of parents. I handed Milo over, told everyone we were ending the tour early due to unexpected sight damage. I filed the paperwork, kept it dry and clean. A few hours later, a cleanup team arrived. But this wasn't normal cleanup. It wasn't just museum-type guys. This time, There were men in dark leather jackets. Strange, since we were in the desert under the hot sun. They moved in a group, didn't ask me any questions, didn't answer mine. One of them had a case of equipment I didn't recognize. Another had a gun. When I asked one of the ministry reps who they were, he just said, "Monster hunters from the Institute." No other explanation, no business card. I didn't push it. I let them do their thing. I stood outside with Jet, drinking from my canteen, watching the sun dip behind the ridge. That's when one of the local workers came over. Older man, heavy lines on his face. He'd been around for a long time, helped me on 2 sites before. "You saw it," he said. Not a question. I nodded. "The dead ain't being disturbed. Sleep is all they have left," he said. After that day, I changed how I did tours. I didn't treat it like a sideshow anymore. I still told stories, still made jokes, but I didn't let the kids wander, not even for a second. I counted heads constantly, before the tour, during every stop, and again at the end. I even made the parents count with me. And Jet? Well, he changed too. He stuck closer to the kids after that, didn't run ahead like he used to. If a kid started drifting toward a hallway, Jet was there before I even saw it. He'd herd them back like a little 4-legged guardian, nudging them gently with his nose, or plopping down in front of him like a furry wall. The kids loved him for it. Started feeding him jerky behind their parents' backs. One girl brought him a pack of dried liver snacks shaped like tiny camels. He didn't even chew them, just gulped him down and kept patrolling. I still lead tours, still love it, but I don't take chances anymore. This next story is one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me, but it also happens to be the story of how I met my wife, Charlotte. Back then, I was still early in my fieldwork. I had some digs under my belt, a few papers published, but I wasn't the polished guy you see on tours now. My Arabic was rusty. I could order food, ask for the toilet, and maybe argue over the price of bottled water, but that was about it. Charlotte joined one of my dig teams as a translator. The ministry had loaned her out to us to read some inscriptions from a side chamber we'd uncovered just west of the dig site. She wasn't loud, didn't smile much, wore a wide hat and a permanent frown like the sun itself had offended her. I remember the first thing she said to me. "You're brushing the wrong layer." I looked up, confused. I've been brushing layers for years. "And that's probably why it's all wrong," she said. And that annoyed me. But she was right. I'd been going too deep, scraping past the pottery level and into the compact fill layer. Could have ruined the whole record if she hadn't caught it. So I grumbled and fixed it. She didn't say anything else after that, just kept working. As the days passed, we started talking more. I'd ask her about glyphs on the wall, or she'd correct my numbers when I miscounted an artifact bag. Her Arabic was smooth, effortless. Mine was the broken, clumsy kind you get from half-learning phrases on construction sites. She never laughed at me for it, though. Just corrected me and kept going. There was one day in particular that changed everything. We'd found something strange, an alabaster jar sealed with wax and pressed into a small hollow in the wall. No decorations, no markings on the outside. Looked smooth and pale, like a giant egg. Charlotte stepped forward, brushing the dust off the rim with her fingers. "There's writing underneath it," she said. She tilted the jar gently, just enough to read the inscription carved into the base. She spoke, carefully translating.
It says, "The breath of the coil shall remain sealed. Break, and it shall strike."
I looked at her. You think that means gas? She shrugged.
Could be. Could also be religious poetry. Everything's dramatic in old Egyptian.
I was already reaching for my gloves.
I wouldn't.
She started. Too late. I cracked the wax seal with my trowel and gently pulled the lid off. That's when the cobra came out. It didn't slither. It launched, coiled up and struck like it'd been waiting 1,000 years just to bite someone stupid enough to open that jar. Its body wrapped around my forearm in one smooth motion. Black scales, thick and cold, coiled tight around my skin. I stayed completely still and didn't panic. Jet barked once, sharply, and Charlotte was already moving. She didn't go for the snake. She went for the jar. In one quick movement, she grabbed a nearby trowel and stabbed it into the side of the alabaster. Not hard, just deep enough to shatter it. The moment the jar cracked, something changed. The snake didn't bite or try to strike again. Its muscles went soft. Its head dropped. The body fell off my arm like dead weight. I looked down, and it was already starting to shrivel, like a dried-out branch in the sun. The whole thing took maybe 10 seconds. I looked at Charlotte. She was still holding the trowel and breathing hard. Calm, though. Eyes sharp as ever.
"You okay?"
Yeah, just bruised," I said, staring down at my arm. She stepped closer and pointed at the wall behind the jar.
"This chamber wasn't just a burial spot. It was a guardian vault. These snakes weren't pets. They were protectors, meant to strike anyone who disturbed the seal."
I rubbed my arm. So it wasn't poetry. She smiled just a little.
"Nope."
There was a long pause. The team was still watching us from the edge of the chamber. Nobody moved. Jet sniffed the dead snake and sneezed. I turned to her. "So, dinner?" She raised an eyebrow.
"That's your move after almost dying?"
"Well, I figured I should ask before something else tries to kill me," I replied. She looked at me for a second, then nodded.
"Okay, but you don't get to open anything else without asking me."
"Deal," I replied. We got married not long after that. I was never one for waiting. Neither was she. One day we were brushing sand off broken pottery, and the next we were signing papers in Cairo and drinking warm champagne out of a thermos. Jet was there too, of course. He wore a little scarf for the occasion. After that, the two of them became my constants. Wherever I went, they went. Charlotte, Jet, and me. One strange little team. We kept digging, kept finding things. Egypt had more stories to tell. Well, I'm still going out there in case you're wondering. Still brushing bones, still leading wide-eyed tourists through narrow tombs, still squinting at broken bits of pottery, trying to make sense of them. Jet's a little older now, grayer around the muzzle, but he still runs faster than most of the kids on tours. Charlotte works with me when she's not off consulting for some museum or translating weird inscriptions nobody else can read. And I am still careful about opening things. We've got a little house near the edge of Cairo,
Nothing fancy, but it's ours. Cool tile floors, a lemon tree in the yard, and shelves full of artifacts we probably weren't supposed to keep. It's the kind of place you want to come home to after a long day with the sun beating down on your neck. I figure I'll be doing this job, for the rest of my life, if I can help it. Strange things still happen in Egypt. Always have. The heat plays tricks on your eyes, sure, but some of them aren't tricks. Some of it's real. You just have to stop and look. You have to listen. The stories are still there, buried under rock and dust, waiting. Anyway, I have talked your ear off long enough. Wherever you're headed next, whether it's back home or somewhere stranger, I wish you safe travels. And if you ever find yourself wandering the edges of the pyramids again, look for the guy with the sun hat and the little dog.
My name's Abel. I'm a vampire hunter. It's not a job you apply for. No diploma, no orientation videos. It's something you're either born into or you die figuring out. Me, I was born into it. Born and raised in rural Kansas, not near any city people think of when they picture the state. Just fields and fence posts, dirt roads, a few houses spread out like dots on an old map. One diner, 2 churches, 3 families that stayed put for 4 generations. Ours was one of them. My folks were honest about why they had me. It wasn't love or planning or a miracle. They had me because the line needed to keep going. The way other families hand down farmland or debt, mine handed down sharpened stakes and books with handwritten notes in the margins. They told me when I was 5 that I was the next in line. I didn't go to college, never even filled out an application. My school counselor tried to talk to me once about scholarships and careers. She had this brochure in her hand, something with a smiling kid holding a laptop on a campus lawn. I told her it wasn't going to happen. She thought I meant we couldn't afford it. I didn't bother correcting her. Let her think it was about the money. The truth would have made her very uncomfortable, and I've never been the type to talk more than I have to. I wasn't raised like other kids. I didn't have baseball practice or summer camps. I had morning drills with Dad. Every Saturday at dawn, rain or shine, he'd wake me up, hand me a wooden dowel the size of a sword handle, and we'd practice. Not flashy, movie-style stuff, just stance, grip, movement. He taught me how to move my feet so I wouldn't trip in gravel. Taught me how to read signs in dirt. Taught me how to tell when a smile is too wide or when someone's voice is a little too smooth. That's one of the first things you learn. Vampires don't all act the same. They don't all wear black or slink around like they've got something to hide. They adapt. They learn fast. Down south, they sing a lot. They've got these syrupy voices, like honey poured over warm cornbread. Sweet and slow. Folks let their guard down real easy down there. In Boston, they're a little different. Rude, even. Talk fast, move faster. Can't waste time when the city doesn't sleep. In Asia, they're more connected, networked, less individual predators, and more like cells in a bigger thing. That part scares me more than anything. Cities, that's where the worst ones hide. They've been there longer. They've learned how to blend. Some run companies. Others work late-night shifts. The longer they're around people, the more natural they seem. You might be wondering if I resented it. The training, the pressure, the strange lifestyle. I didn't. I still don't. I never had that weird teenage crisis of who am I or what do I want to be. I knew. I always knew. When my friends were flipping through career books, I was memorizing bloodlines. When they went to prom, I was practicing how to disable someone without killing them. I didn't envy them. I didn't even think they were wrong. Just different. It's not a glamorous life. No awards, no recognition. Nobody throws you a parade when you stop something very bad from spreading. You just pack up and drive to the next place. But there's something clean about it. Something honest. When I hunt, I know exactly who I am. There's no guesswork, no pretending. I don't lie to myself about the world being fair or people always being good way deep down. I see things as they are. My mom taught me that part. She wasn't a hunter like my dad. She was the researcher. She tracked patterns, kept logs, wrote down everything they learned, what worked, what didn't, what changed from place to place. She'd sit at the kitchen table late into the night, poring over old cases, her handwriting sharp and neat, like every letter mattered. She'd say things like, "They get smarter every year," or, "You have to listen more than you talk." Dad handled the fighting. Mom handled the thinking. And I learned both. Some people think hunting's all about strength. It's not. It's about patience, about listening, about knowing when not to act. Sometimes you wait 3 weeks in a town without doing a damn thing, just watching, listening, following a trail that might not lead anywhere. But if you're lucky and quiet and careful, you'll find something. And if you're not careful, it'll find you first. I've been at it on my own for, 7 years now, since I was a teen. Dad passed away before I finished my training, but he left enough behind for me to keep going. Notes, letters, tips on places to avoid, people to trust. There's a woman in Ohio who makes custom weapons, a trucker who runs supplies across state lines, no questions asked, a preacher in Louisiana who can tell when someone's not quite human. These aren't friends, they're contacts. That's another thing you learn. You don't get too close to anyone. Sooner or later, you'll have to leave or bury them. I'm writing this down now because, someone has to. Mom kept records. She said memory fades, but ink lasts. It's my turn now. Every little thing matters. Patterns, words, faces. Someday, someone else will need this, like I did. So I write it all down. My name is Abel. I'm a vampire hunter. And these are my stories. I was 18 the first time I killed a vampire. That age where you don't feel like a kid anymore, but you still think like one. You're out of school, no longer told where to go or when to wake up, and yet you haven't really lived anything. There's a strange confidence that comes with that in-between. You believe you're ready for the world, mostly because you don't know what the world is capable of. My father used to say that 18 was a dangerous age. You have energy and instinct, but your judgment hasn't caught up yet. He called it the edge and said everyone has to fall off at once. For me, it happened in rural Kansas, inside a church basement that had gone sour without anyone noticing. I was staying in town to help one of my dad's old friends fix a roof and look into some local rumors. Nothing official, just quiet work, watching from a distance. But trouble never follows your calendar. It shows up when it wants to. After service one Sunday morning at St. Luke's, the local priest pulled me aside near the gravel parking lot. His shirt collar was loose, and his hands shook when he spoke. He didn't ask questions or explain himself, just passed me a folded piece of paper and told me to read it later. Alone. I waited until I was a few blocks away before I opened it. The handwriting was messy. It read, "I believe something is hiding in the basement. Please come after dark, and do not bring anything that looks like a weapon." That last part told me the priest had a gut feeling about what he was dealing with. He didn't know the rules, not in full, but he understood enough to keep quiet and not make a scene. I returned to the church the next evening, just after sundown. The main doors were locked, but the priest met me at the side entrance near the rectory garden. He didn't say much. We walked through the narrow back hallway, past classrooms and storage closets, and eventually came to the stairs behind the altar that led to the basement. Then he left, telling me he couldn't bear to find out what devil had been haunting the basement. He offered a prayer, and back up he went. As soon as I stepped down the first few steps, I could feel the shift in the air. The wood underfoot creaked more than it should have, and the temperature dropped with each level. I stopped at a narrow door marked storage. I opened it with a brass key the priest had given me, and stopped. There were empty blood bags, medical grade, scattered nearby, torn apart with sharp teeth and carelessness. The light overhead was dim and flickering, but I could make out a figure crouched in the corner, partially hidden by an old wire rack. He was humming. Not a melody I recognized, just a soft, slow sound, like he was keeping rhythm with his breath. As I stepped closer, I saw him more clearly. A man in a tailored vest with his sleeves rolled to the elbow, kneeling over a half-torn blood bag. He didn't see me. That's something they do. When they feed, they lose their awareness. It's a moment of weakness, kind of like being drunk. They forget they're predators, forget the world outside is their prey. My father taught me that if you ever catch one in that state, you don't hesitate, and you don't wait for it to turn and recognize you. You act. I stepped forward fast and drove the sharpened chair leg I'd been carrying into the upper back, aiming low between the shoulder blades. The man jerked violently. His body collapsed onto the floor in a heavy sprawl. I pulled the stake out and struck again, this time straight through the middle. He twitched once, then stopped moving. The vampire didn't look special in death. No claws, no monstrous transformation. Just a man in clean clothes with a little blood on his collar, until his body began to break down. Within seconds, the skin cracked, the muscle caved in, and he disintegrated into a pile of fine ash. The smell hit me next, sharp and bitter, like coffee grounds soaked in cheap alcohol. It stung the nose, clean and unnatural. I left the room and locked the door behind me. The priest was waiting upstairs, pacing in the hallway. When he saw my face, he stopped. "It's done. You don't have to worry about him anymore," I said. He opened his mouth like he wanted to ask a question, but nothing came out. And I gave him a warning before I left. Don't open your doors to strangers anymore. If someone stops outside and asks to come in, even if they sound friendly, even if they look like they belong, do not let them pass the threshold. If they were human, they wouldn't have to ask, I said. My father came into town the following day. I didn't go into detail. He could read the aftermath without being told. It wasn't a hard case to solve. Just a simple stray vampire with no backup and no real plan, The kind that slips into a place unnoticed and feeds quietly until someone gets wise. It was more like taking out a nest of bugs than anything else. No mess, no moral knots to untangle. We spent the day reinforcing the church, replacing logs, spreading salt in the corners, and fixing the window frames. When it was done, he dusted off his hands and looked at me. Then he gave me a single pat on the back. And that was the moment I knew that I wasn't on the edge anymore. I'd gone over. There wasn't any going back to before. Not mentally, not spiritually, not in any way that counted. I'd crossed the line. The next one happened when I was up north in Chicago. I was there on business. But I'll admit something. I like the city. The lights made everything glow like it was on fire, and the buildings stretched so tall, they looked like they were leaning over you. I love the buzz of it. The mess, the noise, the way everyone always seemed just a little pissed off, but, never surprised. The people don't hide who they are, and that went a long way with me. They'd curse you out, cut in front of you in line, and maybe even shoulder you without an apology. But they meant what they said. You didn't have to waste time figuring them out. And the food? The best I ever had came out of a kitchen that could barely fit the chef himself. I ate standing up in an alley behind the place because the shop had no seating. Didn't matter. The bread was still warm, and the meat had this spice that stayed on your tongue like it was making a case for itself. Even now, I remember the taste better than most of the faces. But I wasn't there for a vacation. I'd been tracking a vampire that had slipped out from Oakbrook. Mid-level parasite, smart enough to relocate before people caught on. I followed its trail to a nightclub on the west side, the kind that didn't bother with signage or security. You only got in if someone thought you were cool enough or dangerous enough. I wasn't either, but I knew how to look like I belonged. The place was packed, people sweating under pulsing lights, music thudding loud enough to blur your thoughts. I was on the second-level walkway, keeping eyes on the far corner where my mark had disappeared half an hour earlier. He was the type that moved slow in crowds, like he was walking through fog. Real vampires do that sometimes. They never rush anymore. Not like us humans living on borrowed time. And then, just as the bass dropped into another song, I heard a gunshot from the alley outside. It cracked against the back wall like a whip, sharp and unmistakable. Some people turned. Most didn't. I didn't wait. I slipped out the back entrance. In the alley, I saw two figures. One of them was already running, fast and crooked, stumbling down the narrow lane toward the street. The other was standing still, silver gun raised, smoke still curling from the barrel. I moved in quickly and looked down at the pavement near the doorway. The blood on the ground wasn't pooling. It was sizzling where it hit the concrete. And that was all I needed to see. Only one kind of blood does that. "You shot a vampire," I said. The kid turned to me, probably around 17 or 18, wearing a jacket with too many pockets and a patch on the sleeve I didn't recognize. His hands were slightly shaking, not from fear it looked like, but from adrenaline. He was riding the high of it. "Damn right I did. I clipped him, I think," he said. I stepped closer. Yeah, you don't shoot in a crowd. You don't fire in a nightclub alley where they're still feeding and you have no clue how many are inside. You shoot, it runs, and now it's hungry and pissed off with no leash, I said. He raised an eyebrow like I just insulted his mother. "You a hunter?" "Vampire hunter, yeah. You?" I replied. He gave a half smile, then pointed to the patch on his sleeve. "Institute. Monster Division. Name's Milo." And that was when it all made sense. Vampire hunters and monster hunters, we don't mix well. We're cousins, not brothers. Same family tree, but on branches that don't speak unless they have to. I was homeschooled, in a way. Trained by my father, who was trained by his father, tested by small-town cases and long drives. These institute kids, they go to training camps and sleep in bunkhouses, write field reports, and do tests on werewolves in glass cages. I mean, come on. I've never liked the way they walk into a place with their heads already full of theory. Dad said they'd increased their efforts in recruitment the last 7 years. In my opinion, that just meant the newer ones were more full of shit. Milo looked at me and shrugged. Whatever, man. It's handled. No, dude, it's not. It got away, I began. That's not handled. You left a live one with no plan, no tail, no scent trail, and a wound to remind it who burned it, I said. He made some smart-ass comment I don't remember word for word. Something about how I sounded like a dad who used to walk uphill both ways. I didn't respond. There wasn't any point. I spent the next 4 days tracking the one he'd let slip. I followed a missing persons report that matched the profile. The vampire had holed up in a shuttered apartment complex near the edge of Little Village, a place scheduled for demolition that never quite got there. No one checked it anymore. The door was chained shut from the outside, but the inside told me everything I needed to know. The smell of decay was thick. There were drag marks on the floor, dry blood trails leading down into the basement. I marked the door frames, set the garlic smoke canister near the stairwell, and laid sage at each window crack. When the time came, I lit the fuse and waited. The smoke went down first, thick and sharp, designed to disorient and sting. I followed right after, stake in hand, ears tuned to movement. He came out of the dark fast, but not fast enough. His face was half burned from the herbs, eyes watering, body uncoordinated. The stake hit home on the second try. He made a gurgling sound and collapsed without ceremony. I stayed for a long while after that, just to make sure no one else was hiding. I never saw Milo again in Chicago. He probably got sent to some other city, or back to whatever institute dorm they were keeping him in. Now, most of my tips come from people, regular ones. A bartender who noticed a regular stopped drinking. A janitor who found weird stains in a school basement. A pawn shop owner who swore a guy pawned a Rolex soaked in something that wasn't water. But when I'm in a city, I have one guy I go to first. Zazo. He's a goblin. Lives in the sewer systems under the city. Says he likes the smell, and I don't question it. Zazo's not exactly friendly, but he's reliable. You give him what he wants, and he tells you everything. He doesn't take cash, and he doesn't care about favors. He only wants 2 things: fresh apple beer and full-size Snickers bars. Has to be both. One without the other, and he'll throw it back at you. He's done it to me a couple times. This time, I brought 2 6-packs and a plastic bag with 6 bars, still cold from the cooler. He sniffed them both before he even looked me in the eye. "You finally bring me the real kind, or did you get that light crap again?" he said. "Yeah, it's regular apple beer, and 6 whole Snickers full size. You counted last time," I said. Zazo let out a wheezing sound that might have been a laugh. He took the bag and popped one of the beers open using his sharp little teeth. He drank half of it in one go, foam sticking to his chin like shaving cream. All right. You brought what I like. What do you want?" he asked. I told him about a small suburban neighborhood on the edge of the city. Quiet place. Nothing remarkable. But lately, the police blotter had started filling up with low-level crimes. Break-ins, missing pets, theft, minor arson. More troubling was the spike in homeless disappearances. People thought it was a coincidence or maybe a serial killer. I knew better. When the most vulnerable start disappearing first, it usually means something is feeding. Zazo nodded slowly as I spoke, his eyes narrowing with each word.
Yeah, you're right. Something's in the water. Word is a coven's been growing fast. Got too big for their old holes, so they've been spreading out. City to city, tasting what's new. Trying to get smarter, he said.
He licked chocolate off his fingers before continuing.
Well, they're not all together. The coven, it's like a big tree. You've got the root, but 100 branches. You're looking at one of those small branches, a side group. Greedy little freaks. Didn't wait for orders. Just marched in and started feeding.
Where? I asked.
He grinned. Abandoned laundromat. East side. It's a front. No one washes clothes there. Not even the rats. It's the entrance to their nest. And your problem is only gonna get worse. They're sloppy. They're high on blood. And they think no one's watching.
I nodded and stood up. He watched me gather my things.
You know, other hunters come to this city, but none of them respect the value of the informant. They think they can all do it themselves. Kick doors, swing swords, shoot monsters in the middle of the street. Bunch of amateurs, he said.
I handed him another Snickers. Well, that's why I come to you first. He tucked the candy into a pouch on his hip and looked proud, like a king getting tribute. He didn't say goodbye. He never does. I spent the next 3 days planning the bust. These things can't be rushed. Monsters in groups are more dangerous than alone. They get confident. They start organizing. If you take them head on without prep, someone dies. And I've buried too many someones already. I scouted the building first. It looked dead from the outside. Half the windows boarded, signage faded to the point of invisibility. The door was chained shut, but I could see movement inside at night. Not much, just enough to confirm they weren't keeping normal hours. I called in a few people I trusted. One of them was a gear tech who specialized in detection equipment, old Institute dropout who preferred freelancing. Another was a field medic who'd patched me up more than once. I reached out to an Institute hunter for backup. I try to avoid working with them unless I have to, but a good hunter's a good hunter, even if he files reports after. We met twice before the operation. We had garlic canisters, UV flash units, stakes, blades, and enough salt to make the whole place unfriendly for anything with fangs. I went over every escape route, every possible complication, and what to do if the place turned out to be deeper than expected. When the day came, it was God's good Sunday. Morning felt clean, bright sun, families out walking. A perfect day to pretend nothing was wrong. We rolled out quiet. 3 vehicles spaced out over 6 blocks. The laundromat was in a pocket of old buildings and empty storefronts, the kind of spot people pass without noticing. As we approached, I felt that shift again. That sense that something lived behind the walls that didn't belong to our world. I'd felt it before. Never gets easier. I stood across the street for a moment, looking at the chipped paint and rusted siding. The windows were dark. No sound came from inside. No movement either. But I knew better. I could feel it in my teeth. The whole place was tense. "You ready?" the Institute guy asked, tightening his vest straps. I didn't answer right away. I was looking at the cracked sign above the door. Spin City Laundry in faded red letters. Probably hadn't run a washer in 10 years. I adjusted the strap on my pack, checked the stake at my side, and gave a single nod. We surrounded the place just after noon. Streets were mostly empty. The kind of quiet that makes you second guess how loud your boots are. There were 5 of us. I took point on the front door with the Institute guy watching my 6. 2 others circled around back to seal off the alley. The last stayed posted on the side in case anything tried to slip out through the basement windows. We laid garlic along the back wall and window cells. It burns their lungs and eyes, but that's not always enough. Silver is better. Some say real silver is God's metal, that no matter what kind of monster you're dealing with, it burns them the same. Vampire, ghoul, siren, even the nice ones that just want to be left alone. Doesn't matter. Silver makes them bleed and scream. It's like we were given one thing, just one, to defend ourselves with. Something they can't undo or outgrow. Their speed, their teeth, their unnatural power doesn't mean much when silver touches them. I loaded my gun with silver rounds and gave the signal. A sharp wave of my hand down and a short nod. Then we moved. The front door led straight into the laundromat. Cracked tile floor, 3 dead machines, a broken vending unit, and fluorescent lights that blinked. We cleared the front quickly. Nothing there but mildew and bad wiring. The real action was behind the false wall, through a busted out door frame where the plaster had been torn off and a narrow hall led into the attached house. It was hotter in there, thick with smoke. Someone had been burning incense non-stop, a heavy mix of dried herbs that clung to your skin and made your head swim. The air stung my eyes. I pulled up a cloth mask over my nose and motioned for the others to do the same. And then I saw them. People, at least 10, maybe more, scattered through the living room and into the hallway. All of them were unconscious or close to it. Some curled into cushions like they'd passed out mid-conversation. Most were women and unhoused men. All of them had pale skin and dark stains at the neck. Not fresh wounds, just slow, steady feeding. They were being kept in a fog, breathing in sedatives while their blood was taken little by little. I gave the signal, sharp and short. We moved in silently, each of us grabbing one person at a time and carrying them out. I watched every exit as my team moved back and forth like clockwork. One by one, the bodies were hauled out and laid onto tarps in the lot out front, where the medic could check vitals and prep IV drips. Most of them would live, though I'd bet a few wouldn't remember much beyond a blur of heat and sleep. Once the last victim was out, I motioned for 2 men to follow me. We cleared the hallway and turned the corner, where a stairwell climbed to a 2nd floor. The carpet was matted with dirt and dark spots. I stepped lightly, gun raised. At the top of the stairs was the master bedroom. The door was halfway open, and something inside moved. I stepped in first. The room was dim. Thick curtains blocked out the sun. In the corner, crouched low over a figure slumped on a stained mattress, was a vampire. It didn't turn when we entered. Its face was buried against the victim's neck, body hunched, back rising and falling as it drank. The victim was still twitching, a young man, probably homeless, dragged off the street like the others. We didn't speak. I fired first. The silver round caught the vampire in the shoulder. The second man fired a moment after me, catching it in the hip. The creature howled and turned towards us, blood still dripping from its mouth. Its eyes were wide, more animal than human. It lunged. The third bullet missed. It knocked my partner down with a blow across the head, and leapt for me. I didn't wait. I pulled the trigger again. The fourth bullet hit straight through the heart. It froze mid-motion, mouth still parted. Then it dropped. We stood still for a moment, guns still raised. My teammate on the ground cursed under his breath and sat up slowly. I pulled him back toward the wall and told him to sit still until the medic arrived. He nodded, eyes glassy. I was about to call it in when I heard something small from across the room. A faint thump. I turned and followed the sound to the bedroom closet. Inside, curled up on a pile of old towels, was a girl, 12 maybe. Thin arms, scraped knees, dirt on her face. She wore a UCLA t-shirt that was much too big for her, the kind of shirt you might find in a donation bin or on a sale rack for 50 cents. She didn't scream. She just looked at me with wide eyes and didn't move. "You're safe," I said. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes went wide, and her hands gripped the hem of the oversized shirt. I kept my voice low and steady. "What's your name?" I asked. "Maya." "Hi, Maya. I'm Abel." She nodded, still not blinking. "Can you tell me how you got here?" I asked. I don't know. A man said I could wait inside for my mom. He said it was warm. And then I woke up in the closet." "You did good, Maya. You stayed quiet." I held out my arms. "Is it okay if I carry you?" She nodded again, slower this time. When I lifted her, she wrapped one arm around my neck, weak but sure. "You're gonna be all right. We're taking you to someplace safe," I said. Outside, the team cleared a space. We laid her gently onto a stretcher. She was breathing steady. The medic looked over her and nodded. I stayed long enough to ride with her to the Hunter-sanctioned hospital on the edge of town. The staff knew what to do. Discreet, fast, trained to handle situations like this without asking questions they didn't want answers to. I stayed until she was stable, then slipped out before press or family could show up. The case was closed. Victims rescued. Threat eliminated. Everyone would sleep a little easier, at least for a while. But I made a note in my journal that night. There was only one vampire in the house. One. That didn't sit right with me. A whole coven doesn't move in and only leave one behind. That's not how they operate. After the job, I stuck around for a few extra days, worked with the Institute guys to access their older reports, cross-check missing persons cases, feeding patterns, relocation logs. Then I called my mom. She still keeps tabs on movement trends, even in retirement. Between her notes and what I saw, the pattern was clear. Covens have been moving more. Not just growing, but spreading out, shifting territory, faster and more coordinated than before. That means one thing. There's more work ahead. Well, I'm 30 now. My friends, the few I've kept, like to joke that I'm going gray around the sideburns. They say I'm aging like a war veteran, 10 years ahead of schedule. I tell them it's just the lighting. Truth is, they're right, and I don't mind. You don't do this job expecting to look young forever. You do it knowing every year you get is earned. Zazo's still around, same as always. Still in the sewer, still picky about his apple beer, still counting the Snickers bars before he talks. He says I'm the only one who brings the good kind, the kind with the crunchy peanuts and no funny labels. I bring him what he asks for, and he keeps me in the loop. There are worse arrangements. As for me, I'm still out there, still chasing things that most people don't want to know exist, still watching alleyways, checking basements, taking quiet calls from voices that are too afraid to go to the police. The cities change, the names, the faces, The news cycles, they move fast. But the monsters don't. They're patient. They wait. And as long as they're out there, I'll be hunting. Missing persons cases are different in a place like Daggerland. In Westlake or even North Olmsted, a kid goes missing and there's helicopters, news crews, half the city looking. Here, you had a couple deputies, some volunteers, and whatever neighbors are still willing to tromp through the woods with a flashlight after dark. Most times, they don't find much. The thing is, these cases are almost worse than murders. With a murder, at least there's an answer. A body, a suspect, something that closes the loop. A missing person leaves nothing but an empty space. No proof of death, no proof of life, just the gnawing thought that maybe they're still out there. In a town like this, that uncertainty spreads like a layer of underlying rot. Jenny Harper had been at the town meeting that evening, sitting stiff-backed in the folding chair while Sheriff George Lost laid down the rules. No going near the lake after dark. No walking alone along the shoreline. No children near the water. If you see something strange, call the sheriff immediately. He didn't sugarcoat it. There was something out there. She'd come home with those words burned into her brain, repeating them to herself like a talisman. As she locked up the bakery, again as she drove home, and again as she walked through the front door. Now at home in her kitchen, she recited the sheriff's rules word for word while she wiped down already clean counters. No lake road after sundown, she said, scrubbing a spot that wasn't there. No water past your knees. If you hear something calling your name, don't answer. Daniel Harper leaned on the doorway, arms crossed. He'd heard it all 3 times already. Jenny, he said, the kids aren't going near the lake. We got school, work, life. Look, baby, we don't need to turn this into some kind of... The sheriff is not a hysterical man, she cut in. If he wants to lock up the town, it's because he's seen something. You weren't at the meeting. You didn't see his face. Look, Daniel began. What I see is you going overboard. Locks are fine, honey. Rules are fine, but you're talking like... I want us out of here, she said suddenly. Just for a few days. We can go to my mom's in Cleveland. We can take the kids and we can stay there until things calm down. Daniel frowned at that. That's almost a 2-hour drive at night. It's safer than staying here, she replied. Her eyes flicked toward Tyler and Megan at the table, silently eating their dinner. Tyler looked up at the word safer, but Megan kept her head down, fingers wrapped tightly around her fork. Jenny noticed the fork. She noticed everything. A cabinet door left ajar, the way the salt shaker had been moved 2 inches from where she'd left it. The crumbs that clung to the cutting board, no matter how many times she wiped it. Once she spotted something out of place, she couldn't let it go, not until it was fixed. Daniel had lost count of the number of times she'd stopped mid-conversation to straighten a picture frame or refold a dish towel. It wasn't just neatness. It was her way of keeping her fears under control. When the world got messy, when things happened that you couldn't explain or stop, she doubled down on the things she could. A crooked lampshade might get 3 separate adjustments before she was satisfied. She'd check the locks, then check them again, then run her fingers over the deadbolt just to feel it was right. That same restlessness was in her voice now. Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded. He knew his wife and he loved her, but Daniel understood that she wouldn't stop worrying until they left. Okay, honey, okay. We'll pack up and go. Jenny moved fast, because moving fast kept her from thinking too much. She made piles on the bed, one per person, shirts folded the same way, socks nested heel to toe, toothbrushes zipped into clear bags. She wrote a list on the back of a bakery receipt. Chargers, inhaler, snacks, water, cash. Underneath, she wrote the sheriff's exact rules in cramped block letters and tore the receipt free. Taking her first load out to the car, she taped it to the dash with a strip of blue painter's tape from the junk drawer. Her son Tyler stuffed a flashlight and his monster book into his backpack. He hovered in the doorway, half excited, half pretending he wasn't. Are we really going to Grandma's? For a few days, Jenny said. Shoes on, come on, hoodie. Her daughter Megan padded down the hall, hugging a stuffed rabbit with one flattened ear. Does Grandma have nightlights? She asked. She does now, Jenny said, smiling, and dropped 2 plug-ins into the bag. Daniel did a pass for cables in his laptop. He glanced at the answering machine with 2 red blips and hit play. Mendez's voice from the station, asking folks to respect the curfew. Another from a neighbor saying the meeting got pretty serious. He deleted both and grabbed the car keys. At the door, Jenny set her palm on the deadbolt, pressed, counted to 4. She tugged the handle twice, breathed, then tugged it a 3rd time. Daniel could have teased her, but he didn't. He opened the garage instead. They finished loading the SUV. Jenny buckled Megan, then checked the buckle, then slid the strap flat because twists meant bruises. She did the same for Tyler, ignoring his eye roll. Daniel started the engine, and they rolled out slowly, tires thumping quietly on the seam at the end of the driveway, and hummed away into the night. The headlights washed over the neighborhood as they drove. They took a right at the main road and made it a half mile before stopping at the temporary sign someone from the county had bolted onto a post. Lake Road closed after dusk by order of the sheriff. The metal looked fresh, the letters stark. They didn't have a choice. This was the only way out to I-90 West into Cleveland. Windows up, Jenny said, her eyes fixed straight ahead. We don't stop for anything. She took her husband's hand as they slowly pulled past the sign and onto Lake Road. Houses thinned, replaced by long stretches of scrub and the occasional dock lane arrowing toward the dark water. Far out, a buoy bell clanged once, a lonely sound carried up by a wind that smelled faintly metallic. Daniel watched Jenny's profile, how she scanned the shoulder, then the mirror, then the dash like a pilot before takeoff. The painter's tape with the sheriff's rules fluttered whenever the vents clicked on. Lake Road was narrow here, hemmed in by brush on the left and the steep drop to the water on the right. Guardrails ran in broken segments, their reflectors catching the headlights in quick white blinks. Between them, the lake showed through, black and endless, its surface rippling just enough to break up the moon's reflection. Every so often, the beam swept over a dock lane, plunging toward the water. Most were chained off, but a few stood open, the gravel shining faintly in the low light. Daniel kept his eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel, but Jenny noticed how his jaw shifted every time one came up. The road felt quieter than it should have. Even the tires seemed muted. Somewhere out on the lake, the buoy bell gave a single hollow clang. In the back seat, Tyler leaned forward, eyes bright. Josh said he saw a monster in the water. A real monster. His tone a mix of excitement and disbelief, like he wanted it to be true. Daniel grinned without taking his eyes off the road. There's no monsters, Tyler. He let the pause stretch. Except if you count Grandma. Tyler snorted. Megan giggled into a rabbit. Daniel leaned over just far enough to kiss Jenny on the cheek. I'm kidding, honey. You know I love your mother. Jenny shook her head, but didn't hide her smile. Uh-huh. They rounded the next bend, and that was when the headlights flickered, once, then again, before the dash lights dimmed and the SUV gave a low, shuddering cough. Daniel's eyes darted to the gauges. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. The engine sputtered, caught for half a second, then died completely. The power steering went with it, forcing Daniel to muscle the wheel as the SUV coasted forward in silence. The only sound now was the faint hiss of the tires on asphalt. Jenny's smile was gone. What is it? I don't know, honey. Battery, fuel pump, I don't know, Daniel said, guiding them toward the shoulder. He braked, and the SUV rolled to a stop beside a section of guardrail. Beyond it, the slope dropped steeply into a tangle of brush and black water. The moon shimmered faintly on the lake's surface below. Daniel set the shifter in park, killed the lights, and exhaled. Stay here, I'll check under the hood. Jenny unbuckled halfway. Call the sheriff first. I will, honey, I will, he said, already reaching for his phone as he pushed the door open. Cold air slid in immediately, smelling sharper this close to the water. Daniel's boots scuffed the pavement as he walked around to the front. He popped the hood. The hinges gave a dry squeal. Jenny rebuckled, glanced back at the kids. You both stay strapped in. Tyler was craning his neck to see past her shoulder, but Megan had sunk low, rabbit pressed close to her face. Jenny reached back, squeezed her knee, then pulled her own phone out. No bars. Outside, Daniel angled his body away from the windshield, the phone cupped to his ear. He nodded at something, kicked at the gravel, then disappeared a little farther up the shoulder. Jenny tried to see him through the side mirror, but the angle just caught the glare of their own taillights bouncing off the guardrail. She tapped her thumb on the wheel, eyes flicking between the mirror and the kids. The seconds drew out. The lake breathed against the rocks somewhere below, a slow sucking sound like water pulling at weeds. Once, a faint splash carried up, too big for a fish, too quick for a wave. Jenny told herself it was nothing. A pair of headlights swept around the far bend behind them, far enough away that they looked like two pinpricks moving through the trees. The glow grew, sliding across the inside of the SUV like a slow searchlight. Jenny sat up a little, thinking maybe it would stop. The beams climbed the curve of the guardrail, spilling silver over the hood. For a moment, the interior of the car felt warmer, safer, simply because another human being was out there in the dark with them. And then the light shifted. The vehicle behind them drifted toward the center line, its high beams momentarily bleaching the inside of the SUV so bright Jenny had to blink. She caught the profile of the driver, or thought she did, but it was gone too fast to be certain. The tires hissed past without slowing, the receding glow washing over the curve ahead before vanishing completely. And just like that, they were alone again. The darkness didn't just come back. It seemed to fold over them, thicker than before. The only light left was the anemic glow from the dash and the pale silver of the moon on the lake below. Jenny listened for the sound of the other car, an engine, anything. But all she heard was the faint slap of the water against rocks. She glanced at the clock on the dash. A little after midnight. Daniel had been outside for what, 3-4 minutes? She thought about getting out, but her stomach tightened at the idea of standing on that shoulder with a lake yawning beside her. The driver's door opened again, and Daniel leaned in. "All right, well, Marcus is on his way." Jenny blinked at that. "Marcus?" Yeah, he's closer than the sheriff, you know. He can be here in 15, Daniel replied, before quickly shutting the door before she could argue and going back to the hood. Jenny stared out in shock. Her husband had not called the sheriff. Jenny sat there for a beat, pulse ticking in her ears. Then she unbuckled, shoved the door open, and stepped out into the cold. The slam echoed along the guardrail and out toward the water. Daniel straightened from the engine bay, his expression already bracing for it. "Jenny, you called Marcus?" she interrupted, striding toward him. "We're stuck on Lake Road in the middle of the night, and you call a mechanic instead of the sheriff." "Jenny, he's closer, okay? He can tow us out faster." "That's not the point," she replied. She was pacing now, hands tight at her sides. "The sheriff knows what's been happening out here. He knows what's in that lake." Daniel rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Oh my God, honey. And what's he gonna do? Show up with a net? If something's out there, George Lost isn't gonna save us any faster than Marcus can." She turned on him, eyes sharp. "You weren't at the meeting? You didn't see his face?" The wind came in off the lake, bringing that wet metal smell again. Jenny walked a few paces toward the guardrail, then back toward the SUV, her boots crunching on grit. "Jenny," Daniel warned, glancing toward the kids through the windshield. "You're scaring them." "I'm not the one," she started. But the rest never came. Something dark shot across the road, so fast it barely had shape. Just motion and weight, and the sickening thud of impact. Jenny's body jerked sideways and was gone, yanked off her feet and into the blackness beyond the guardrail before Daniel could even shout. One heartbeat she was there, pacing in the beam of the headlights. The next, there was nothing but the sound of gravel skittering over the edge and the faint slap of water below. "Jenny?" Daniel's voice cracked. He ran toward the rail, heart hammering, trying to make sense of what he'd just seen. But the space where she'd been was empty, headlights burning on nothing, the cold air swallowing his breath. From the SUV, the little girl started to scream. Daniel spun toward them, caught their wide, tear-filled eyes in the headlights' glare, then vaulted the guardrail without thinking. His boots hit the loose gravel on the far side, sliding a half step before he caught himself and started down the slope. It was steeper than it looked. The ground gave way under his heels, clumps of frozen dirt and stones tumbling toward the water. He used one hand to brace against the brush, the other out in front, ready to grab her if he saw her. "Jenny!" His voice came back to him smaller than he expected, swallowed by the cold air. The lake was a dark mirror at the bottom, the moonlight wavering across its surface. He scanned the shoreline for movement, a ripple, a shadow, anything. But it was just black water breathing against the rocks. Another few yards down, and the smell hit him. Sharp. Wet. It clung to the back of his throat. His breath puffed in quick bursts as he kept moving, the sound of the kids crying fading behind him. Then, from somewhere just out of sight to his left, came the faintest splash. Not the lazy slap of water against stone, but a clean, deliberate drop. Daniel froze, every muscle tight. "Jenny?" No answer. Just the water and the wind. He took another cautious step toward the sound, his boots crunching against the gravel. Moonlight caught movement ahead. A shape, low to the ground, its outline broken and hunched. For a heartbeat, Daniel's brain refused to process what he was seeing. Then it shifted, and he saw the trail. A dark smear glistened on the pale stones, leading from the base of the slope to the water's edge. His eyes followed it, and the air seemed to drain out of his lungs. Jenny lay face down at the end of it, her arms limp, her hair dragging in the sand. Something was dragging her. Its claws were sunk deep into her calves, hooked through denim and skin, and it moved in a strange, halting shamble. It moved deliberately, without haste, like it'd done this many times before. Each lurch dragged her another foot toward the lake, the tip of her shoes leaving shallow furrows in the wet gravel. The thing kept dragging her until the black water lapped at her knees, never looking back, never loosening its grip. Daniel thought for a strange, disjointed moment that there was something almost playful in the way it moved. It wasn't just hauling her, it was savoring it. The sway of its shoulders, the little hitch before each step. It made it look like it was keeping time to music. A memory surfaced, uninvited. A reality show he'd caught on TV a few nights back, where a couple was doing the tango. That same deliberate, side-to-side rhythm, the controlled steps, the flourish at the end. This thing was doing that, but with his wife's blood trailing behind it. Daniel's mind flicked between disbelief and rage, but his body was already moving. His hand went to his pocket, fingers closing around the slim handle of his pocket knife. He snapped the blade open without looking, the metallic click sounding small against the water's hush. "Hey," he called. That was all he could think to say. The thing stopped mid-step. Its head swiveled toward him in one slow, fluid motion. Moonlight caught its face, and there it was. Teeth too long, a grin too wide, as if the sight of Daniel was funny. Terror surged cold through Daniel's chest, but he was already moving, splashing into the shallows. The lake swallowed his boots in a single step. Then the water was at his thighs, then his waist. He kicked off the bottom and swam hard, eyes locked on Jenny's still form as the ripples closed over her. The creature didn't move. It just waited. Inside the SUV, Tyler and Megan sat frozen in their seats. The headlights still burned down the empty stretch of road ahead, but it felt darker somehow, as if the light didn't reach as far as it should. Megan sniffled, clutching her rabbit so tightly her knuckles went white. "Where's Mom and Dad?" she whispered. Tyler shook his head. He didn't want to answer because he didn't know, and because saying it out loud might make it real. The car was too quiet. The only sound was the faint tick of the cooling engine and their own breathing. Every so often, a gust of wind rattled the branches along the slope, and Megan would flinch. Tyler gripped his flashlight tighter, angling it toward the floorboard so its glow didn't spill onto the windows. He kept telling himself not to look toward the water. Megan sniffled again. "I don't like it here." Neither of them moved. Then, under the soft rhythm of the waves, came another sound. Low at first, almost like distant thunder. It grew, a steady, throaty rumble rolling over the curve of the road. Tyler's eyes shot to the rearview mirror, but the darkness there stayed unbroken.
The noise swelled, joined by the faint crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights crested the bend behind them, washing through the SUV's interior like daylight. Megan let out a shaky breath. It was a pickup truck. The truck's engine idled low, filling the silence with a heavy hum. Its headlights stretched long across the guardrail, cutting sharp shadows into the slope. Megan pressed closer to Tyler, clutching her rabbit to her chin. Her eyes stayed locked on the rear window until a shape moved across the beams. A man stepped in the light, his limp pronounced as he came forward. His coat hung heavy around his shoulders, and in his hand a small toolbox clinked with every uneven step. Marcus Wilkins, the town mechanic. Marcus looked older than his years, though no one could quite pin down how old he actually was. Thin but wiry, his frame had the kind of strength that came from decades of lifting car parts and tires rather than gym weights. His shoulders carried a permanent stoop, and he favored his left leg with a subtle limp that made his gait uneven. His hands told the story most clearly, bent at the knuckles, stiff with arthritis, yet still strong enough to wrench a bolt free when no one else could. Grease was embedded so deep into his skin that it never fully washed out. Even his fingernails carried permanent stains, like shadows he couldn't scrub away. His face was sunken but sharp, with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed both weary and alert at the same time. His thinning hair, once black, was now almost completely gray, and he wore it cropped short to keep it out of his work. Despite the wear, there was a steadiness about him. A man who knew every rattle and cough of his customers' cars, and who carried that knowledge like armor. He'd lost his wife the previous spring, brain cancer taking her slowly. Since then, Marcus had driven his old truck more, always on the lookout for work to keep himself busy. His only son, Tommy, lived out on the Pennsylvania coast, visiting maybe once a year. Marcus didn't hold it against him. His son had his own family, his own life. But that did mean the shop was quieter than it used to be, and Marcus filled the silence the only way he knew how, with work. And not just paying work. Somewhere along the line, kids in town had figured out that if your bike chain snapped or your handlebars wouldn't straighten, Marcus was the one who could fix it. No charge, no lecture, just a nod, a few turns of a wrench, and the thing was working better than new. Word got around, and before long it became something of a ritual. A bent frame or broken pedal meant a trip to Marcus's shop. He'd even fixed up little Tyler Harper's bike last year. The boy probably didn't even remember. It was just one of those small-town miracles kids take for granted. But Marcus remembered. He remembered every chain he'd set back on its sprocket, every wheel he'd trued. And the very same man who'd once mended what Tyler thought was an impossibly broken bicycle was about to save his life. Marcus stopped at the side of the SUV, bending to peer through the glass. His face was tired, worn by years of hard work and long winters, but steady in a way that made Tyler's chest loosen just a little. "You kids all right in there?" His voice was muffled through the glass, but calm, normal, like this was just another breakdown on just another night. "Where's Mom and Dad?" Megan's voice wavered before Tyler could answer. There's a monster," she blurted. Too fast, like if she didn't get it out, she'd choke on it. Her small hands clutched at her brother's sleeve. "It took Mom." The words hit the glass, muffled, broken by her trembling breath.
To Marcus, it was like hearing through a storm window, half-swallowed syllables, jagged with panic. He caught only fragments. Monster. Mom. He leaned closer, cupping a hand around his ear against the glass. Say again? His voice was steady, though his heart thumped a bit harder in his chest. Tyler shook his head violently, pulling Megan closer, like the very air outside might grab her. Marcus raised a palm, slow and calm, then motioned to the lock with 2 fingers. All right, come on. It's okay, he said. Open up now. For a long moment, nothing moved inside. Just 2 pale faces staring back, eyes wide, chest heaving. Then, with a tiny metallic click, the lock slid. Marcus eased the door open before they could change their minds. All right, come on, he murmured, helping Megan down first, then Tyler. His big hands steadying them both, as if they were made of glass. He guided them toward his truck, his body angled between them and the darkness at the tree line. All right, get in now, he said. You're safe. I'll take care of you. He got them into the backseat of his truck, closing the door with a gentle but firm click. Megan clutched Tyler's arm so tightly her knuckles whitened. Both of them pressed together in the dark cab like they thought the glass might shatter at any second. Marcus gave them a steady nod, a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, before circling around to the driver's side. He slid behind the wheel, fished the radio handset off its clip, and thumbed the button. Hey, Sheriff's Office, this is Marcus Wilkins out on Old Lake Road. I got 2 kids here, scared out of their minds. Something happened. I need somebody out here soon as possible. A burst of static, then a woman's voice crackled back through the line. Marcus, this is Mendez. Sit tight and I'll get a unit to you right away. Where exactly are you? Well, we're a couple miles past Palmer's Bluff, he began, his eyes flicking to the side mirror, scanning the tree line. Pulled over by a black SUV. Kids were inside. Their parents... He paused, realizing that the kids were listening. Well, we just need help right away, he finished. There was the briefest pause before Mendez came back, her tone sharper now. Copy that. Stay put, Marcus. Sending someone out now. Marcus let the handset rest in his lap, staring out into the darkness beyond his headlights. His gut twisted. The kids were safe for the moment, but the night out here felt wrong. He took a slow breath, then glanced back at the 2 small faces peering over the seat, eyes wide and waiting. You 2 just sit tight, he said, voice softer. Help's on the way. He leaned a little closer over the seat. Tell me what happened. Tyler opened his mouth, then shut it again. His eyes darted to Megan, who clutched her rabbit tight. Finally, he said, Something took them. Marcus's jaw tightened. Took them where? To the water, Megan whispered. He reached over to the passenger seat, fingers closing around the long-handled wrench lying there. The weight was solid, familiar. He slid out of the cab, boots crunching gravel, and glanced back at the kids. Don't open these doors, he said firmly, unless it's me or the sheriff. He hesitated a beat, thinking of the children, and then added, You know, when I get scared, I squeeze my hand into a fist. Reminds me I'm still here. He gave them the faintest wink and shut the door behind him. Marcus limped toward the guardrail, the wrench loose but ready in his hand. He stopped at the edge, where the headlights bled pale light across the brush, and leaned over. Down below, the beach glistened in strips of moonlight, the lake lapping slow and steady against the stones. He squinted, searching the shoreline. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Something was lying there, a pale shape against the darker gravel. For a moment, he thought it might just be driftwood. But then he saw an arm, a body. He glanced back in the direction of the tow truck. Two small faces pressed to the glass, waiting. Marcus lifted the wrench in a little half wave, stay put, and swung one leg over the guardrail. His boot slipped on the gravel slope, but he caught himself and began working his way down toward the shoreline, slow and careful, the wrench still gripped tight. The air grew colder the closer he got to the lake. The sound of the waves slowly lapping against the rocks was all he could hear now. At the bottom, the stones crunched underfoot. The body lay sprawled at the edge of the tide, hair dark and wet, limbs at odd angles. Marcus approached, his limp pronounced in the shifting gravel. "Hello?" he called softly, though he already knew there'd be no answer. The figure didn't move. He crouched, bracing himself on the wrench, and in the moonlight he saw the face of a woman, tall, maybe 5'8", he figured, with dark hair plastered across her cheek, her eyes half open and clouded. Marcus's gut tightened. He swallowed hard, forcing himself closer. Her blouse was torn open across the torso, the fabric soaked through and clinging to the skin beneath. At first, it looked like some dark bruise spreading across her right side, until he realized it wasn't bruising at all. It was absence. The flesh beneath her ribs had been ripped open, the cavity raw and hollow. There was no blood pooling, no frantic bleeding the way an injury should have looked. Just a gaping, ragged space where something had been carved out. Inside the tow truck, Tyler and Megan waited in silence. The dome light had clicked off, leaving them lit only by the faint green glow of the dash and the wash of headlights cutting into the night. Megan clutched her rabbit so tight her knuckles ached. Tyler stared straight ahead, trying to keep his breath steady, trying not to think about how long Marcus had been gone. And then a thump, heavy, deliberate, somewhere outside in the gravel. Both of them froze. Another thump, closer this time. Footsteps. Big ones. Megan's eyes widened. "It's him," she whispered, voice thin with hope. "It's the man that helped us." Tyler wanted to believe it. He craned his neck toward the side window. "Yeah, it's just him. Has to be." But when they turned, all they saw was darkness beyond the glass. Something stood there, close enough that its bulk blotted out the reflection of the trees. They couldn't see its face. It was too tall, the top half hidden in shadow above the window line. Only its outline was visible, a slanted shoulder, the rise and fall of something breathing slow and steady. Tyler's heart hammered in his chest. Megan shrank back, her rabbit pulled up beneath her chin. A hand moved. No, not a hand. Longer. A claw. It slid slowly across the glass with a wet, dragging sound. The smear it left behind was dark, streaking through the fogged surface in slow strokes. One line. Another.
then another looping back around. The kids watched in horror as letters began to form. Their breath fogged the inside, while the thing smeared from the outside. The letters crooked, but unmistakable. It read, "Hello." Megan whimpered, a high, choked sound. But before Tyler could shush her, the figure shifted. The weight outside pressed forward. In an instant, the window was filled, face mashed flat against the glass, grin wide. The eyes rolled and locked onto theirs. It held up something red towards the kids, something dripping, and took a big, happy bite of it. Tyler didn't realize it then, but he was staring at a human liver. The thing winked. Megan gasped and dove for the middle of the seat, her rabbit squeezed against her chest. Tyler forced himself to tear his eyes from the window. His hand shot to the door handle, pressing down on the lock to make sure it was still tight. "Check yours," he said quickly. Megan's fingers trembled, but she shoved the knob down until it clicked hard. She nodded, eyes wide, breathing fast. For a moment, the cab was silent. Outside, the creature was still, and then it leaned back, grinned, and tilted its head toward the handle. Slowly, it lowered one long claw until it tapped against the keyhole, like it was testing the shape. And then the claw slid inside. The sound was worse than they imagined. A scraping, scratching whine that made Megan clap her hands over her ears. Tyler bit his lip, frozen, watching the thing's shoulders shift as it probed with exaggerated care, twisting the claw as if it were a skeleton key. The creature pressed its face closer to the glass, eyes rolling toward them, grin widening as it worked. It was enjoying this. There was a scraping sound, and then, click. The lock popped up with a tiny sound. The claw lingered there for a moment, savoring it, and then it slid up to the handle, curling slow and deliberate around the chrome. The door trembled as the latch began to ease back. The gap opened no more than an inch, and then, crack. A blur of iron smashed across the creature's head, just below its left eye. The blow rang out sharp against bone. The thing reeled sideways with a wet grunt, teeth snapping together as its grin finally broke. The kids flinched at the noise. Megan began screaming before she even realized what she was looking at. A figure stood just outside the headlights, bent slightly, chest heaving, both hands locked around the long wrench slick with lake spray. Marcus. He didn't say a word. His face was pale, eyes locked and burning, as if he hadn't climbed back up from the shoreline at all, but risen out of the earth for this one moment. Marcus lifted the wrench again, high and tight against his shoulder, knuckles wide. His bad leg trembled beneath him, but he didn't step back. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The creature straightened slowly, its hunched frame unfurling under the wash of the headlights until it seemed too tall, too broad to be standing on the narrow strip of road. Water dripped from its shoulders, pattering softly against the asphalt. Marcus held his ground and stood between the creature and the children, wrench raised, chest rising and falling, jaw tight as stone. They faced each other in the pale light, two silhouettes locked in a standoff,
an old man with a bad leg, hard years etched into his hands, staring down a thing straight from a nightmare. For a moment, Marcus's mind slid 50-some years back. He was a boy again, sitting on the parson's old plaid couch with his friend Billy, a bowl of popcorn between them. Creature from the Black Lagoon flickered on the TV, black and white images casting long shadows across the room. He pretended to be tough, but the truth was it scared him so badly he wouldn't go near the lake for weeks. Every ripple in the water looked like claws reaching up from the deep. Billy had teased him without mercy, but Marcus never forgot the feeling. And now, here it was again. Only worse. Much worse. The rubber-suited monster from his childhood nightmares had nothing on the thing grinning at him under the Ohio moonlight. The night was silent, except for the steady hush of the lake below, each wave sliding against the rocks like the beat of a low drum. It was their music. The thing tilted its head and dragged one long claw against the metal door of the truck. The screech of steel on steel split the air. Sparks jumped. Marcus didn't wait. He'd never been more scared in all his life, but he shifted his grip, squared his shoulders, and swung. The wrench came down hard, a blur in the half-light, and the creature caught his arm mid-swing. Its claw clamped around his wrist, the strike frozen in place inches from its skull. For a heartbeat, the thing's eyes narrowed, as if surprised by the strength of the old man. Marcus gritted his teeth and shoved back, every muscle in his shoulders and chest straining. Decades of turning wrenches, prying rusted bolts, hauling engines off mounts. It had built a kind of stubborn strength into him. His forearms bulged, the tendons standing out like cords as he pushed against the thing. And for just that moment, he held his own. But strong as he was no match for a creature from nightmares. The grin slid back into place as it leaned closer. Slowly, deliberately, it rolled Marcus's wrist inward, bending the wrench back toward his own shoulder. His arm trembled, locked in place, pain shooting down into his elbow. Then the creature reached forward, one claw traced across his collarbone, then up the side of his neck. Marcus tried to jerk away, but the claw twitched. A sharp sting blossomed under his jaw. Warmth spilled down the left side of his neck, hot and sudden. He staggered backward, dropping the wrench and gripping his neck tightly. Inside the cab, Tyler and Megan pressed against the glass, eyes wide. Blood poured down Marcus's neck, bright and gleaming in the headlights. He staggered backward into their view, clutching at the wound with both hands. For a brief, awful moment, he turned toward the truck. His eyes found theirs through the windshield, wide, stricken, apologetic, as though he wished he could tell the children to run. His knees buckled. Marcus Wilkins crumpled to the asphalt in front of the hood, collapsing hard onto his side. Blood spread beneath him in a slick, slow-growing pool that caught the beams of the headlights and glistened like oil. Megan let out a thin wail, muffled by the glass. Tyler just stared in shock. Beyond Marcus's still form, the creature's shadow loomed, hunched and grinning, stepping forward into the wash of light.
The creature turned and slowly came towards the children. Its claws curled around the door handle. Megan sobbed into her rabbit. Tyler, too frozen even to move. The door began to slowly open, and then headlights flared. An engine roared. A car slammed into the creature with bone-cracking force, the impact hurling it sideways off its feet. The thing spun across the asphalt, skidding in a blur of claws and blood before crashing hard into the guardrail with a shriek of metal. The cruiser skidded to a stop, tires screaming. Red and blue lights erupted, painting the road in frantic color. The kids blinked against the sudden blaze, hearts hammering. A man stepped out of the cruiser, dark hair beneath a sheriff's hat, brown eyes locked hard on the thing sprawled against the guardrail. His revolver was already up, steady in both hands, barrel tracking the creature as it pushed against the twisted metal. Sheriff George Lost. From the same vehicle, another man bolted forward, blondish hair showing under the brim of a baseball cap, green eyes sharp with urgency. He didn't hesitate. He went straight for the truck, straight for the kids. "Get down," he barked. Tyler shoved Megan against the seat as David Winters yanked the door open with a grunt. Behind him, George's revolver cracked. Once, twice. The creature jerked with each shot, a spray of black fluid hitting the guardrail. It still tried to rise up. George fired again. Then he holstered his revolver long enough to pull open the cruiser's back door. "Come on," he barked, waving the kids forward. David half lifted, half shoved Tyler and Megan out of the truck and across the narrow stretch of road. Megan clung to his sleeve, rabbit dangling from her arm, while Tyler stumbled ahead, pale and numb with shock. George caught them both, steadying their shoulders, and guided them into the back seat of the cruiser. "Get down, stay down," he ordered, his voice sharp but not unkind. The kids slid across the seat, clutching each other tight as the red and blue lights washed their faces. George slammed the door shut, turned back, and called over the roof, "Dave!" David was already moving, but he stopped when George's hand shot out, pointing. Marcus. He lay sprawled in front of the tow truck, blood slick and pooling beneath him. His chest heaved faintly, but his eyes were closed, his face waxy in the headlights. George sprinted first, holstering his revolver as he dropped to one knee beside him. "He's alive," he barked, though the word sounded more like a command than a certainty. David skidded in beside him, slipping an arm under Marcus's shoulders. Together they heaved him up, his body sagging heavy between them. His boots dragged along the pavement, leaving dark streaks as they staggered him toward the cruiser. "Easy, easy," David muttered, though Marcus gave no sign he heard. His head lolled against George's shoulder, blood soaking down both their sleeves. The cruiser's rear door stood open. George and David shoved Marcus inside, bracing his body against the seat. His arms flopped limp at his sides, his jaw hung slack, eyes closed. David slid in next to Marcus while trying to keep pressure on the open wound. On the other side of the seat, Tyler and Megan pressed themselves into the corner, knees tucked to their chest. Megan cried softly, hiding her face against her rabbit, while Tyler just stared at Marcus, at the blood on his throat, the rise and fall of his chest that looked too shallow, too slow. George slammed the door shut, and when he turned, the thing was already moving. It peeled itself off the guardrail in the headlights, tall and dripping, claws gleaming wet. George didn't wait. He dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and jammed the shifter into reverse. "Hold on," he barked. The cruiser roared backward, tires shrieking against the asphalt. The sudden lurch threw Tyler and Megan into the floor well. The headlights carved wild arcs across the road as George spun the wheel. The creature surged forward, claws raking at the pavement, but the cruiser fishtailed clear, gravel spitting like gunfire. David kept one hand tied on Marcus's wound, motioning with the other for the kids to stay down. Go, go, he said. George jammed the brakes, wrenched the wheel, and the cruiser spun hard. The rear swung wide, red and blue lights flashing across the trees and the black face of the lake. Then the nose came around, tires biting, and the car shot forward down the road toward town. In the mirror, for one awful second, the creature filled the beams, tall, still grinning, blood streaking down its chin. George's eyes stayed locked on the road, jaw clenched. The lake fell away behind them. Back at the sheriff's station, the quiet felt heavier than the night outside. George sat at the table, a fresh cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Across from him, David slumped forward, his shirt stained with Marcus's blood. He hadn't said a word since the ambulance pulled out. The cruiser parked out front was empty now. The kids had been picked up by their grandparents an hour earlier, bundled into the back of a minivan, and driven away from town without a word. George had stood there and watched until the taillights disappeared, feeling like he'd handed over something fragile that might shatter before it reached safety. "You think Marcus will make it?" David finally asked. "He's tough. That wound on his neck. That would have killed me." George didn't answer right away. He stared into his cup, then set it down. "Doc Graham is doing what he can." David dragged a hand down his face. "We don't even know what it was, George. We don't even know what the hell that thing is." George's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes fixed on the tabletop. He exhaled hard through his nose. "We've got cops from Ashtabula and Paynesville running the shoreline, checking every stretch they can." David looked up. "How many?" "As many as I could get," George began. 10, 12 maybe. Depends on how much time they can give us." George rubbed a hand across his face. "It's not enough. Lake's too big. Too many places to miss." David leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. "And still no sign of the parents?" George shook his head. "Not a thing. Just a few footprints by the bluff. Could be anyone. And those end about 20 yards from the water." Silence stretched. Both men knew what that meant, but neither wanted to say it. Finally, David spoke. "So what's our next move?" The sheriff didn't answer right away, just reached for his coffee. His hand hovered over the mug, but he didn't pick it up. "Well, those cops are here in town tonight," he began. "Good men, working in pairs, sticking close. I told him straight, there's something dangerous out there. Maybe I didn't spell it out, but they know enough to keep their eyes open. They brought extra firepower." David gave a slow nod. George leaned forward, lowering his voice. "And that buys us a little time. A night to think, to plan.
We'll see what tomorrow brings. But people are gonna want answers. I want answers. And I want my town safe again." David nodded. George fell silent. He stared into the coffee and thought. The two kids were alive, thank God, though no one could say what had happened to their parents. Both of the children kept repeating the same thing. Marcus Wilkins had saved them from a monster. George exhaled slowly. Marcus. There'd been a lot of blood. George wasn't a doctor, but he knew it was bad. It was unlikely the old mechanic would survive the night. My name's Ryan Miller, 31, single, and about 2 paychecks away from selling plasma again. The past year has been one long streak of almost landed a full-time gig, almost made rent on time, almost got my old truck to stop leaking oil. I was laid off from my warehouse job last March and have been piecing together side hustles ever since. DoorDash, junk hauling, flipping estate sale furniture, anything that'll pay by the end of the week. That's how I got into storage units. It started simple. Buy a unit, dig through it, flip what you can. Sometimes it's just moldy couch cushions and old tax documents. Sometimes it's a vintage guitar, or someone's coin collection, or electronics they forgot they owned. You roll the dice, open the door, and pray something in there is worth more than the $300 you dropped on it. It's a little like gambling, but with fewer flashing lights and more dust. I started with the cheap ones, units nobody wanted, ones listed as unclaimed for 7+ years or owner deceased, the real junk piles, because once in a while, one of those turns up gold. Last Tuesday, I hit up an auction in Riverside, industrial part of town. Old lot tucked behind a shuttered Payless and a chain link fence that probably hadn't seen a coat of paint since the 90s. Only 5 units up for bidding, and most of the usual flippers were already zeroing in on a furniture heavy one that looked like it might have mid-century chairs. But I noticed one off to the side, unit number 83. No photos, no description. Just unopened since 2012. No known contact. Contents unknown. It had a red tag zip-tied to the lock, but no one else even glanced at it. Auctioneer said he'd include it at the end, but made no promises about what was inside. Might be totally empty. Might be full of rat droppings. Might be mold. I won it for $120. Nobody else even bid. The lock was a thick brass one, different than the usual, almost military style. The guy running the place had to come out with bolt cutters, muttering the whole time about how the last person to rent it paid in cash and never answered their phone. When the door finally rolled up, I was hit with the unmistakable stale air smell. Dust, rust, and a weird, cold, metallic tang, like old blood on a steel pipe. It wasn't empty. It wasn't packed either, but it was organized. That was the first weird part. Most units are just piles of forgotten crap. This one had everything arranged in neat rows. 2 plastic crates full of books, stacked and labeled. A standing wardrobe pushed against a back wall. And a workbench. A legit full-sized workbench covered in tools I didn't recognize. Not your average garage stuff either. No hammers, no drills. There were blades, hooks, metal tools with etchings I couldn't read, things that looked custom built for jobs I didn't want to know about. I stepped inside, on edge. The air felt heavy. I reached for my phone and started taking photos, just in case I needed proof of what I found. And then I noticed the wardrobe was bolted to the ground. Not just bolted, welded, as if someone really didn't want it moved. Curious, I walked over, opened it. Empty. Except the floor of it looked weird, thicker than it should have been. I knocked on it. Hollow. I dropped to my knees, ran my hand along the edge, and felt a tiny groove. A latch? A square of the floor popped up slightly. I grabbed the edge and lifted. Beneath the false bottom, there was a ladder. It disappeared into darkness. And I swear I felt cold air rising from it. I hesitated for a long minute. There wasn't any light coming up from the shaft, just that steady stream of cold air, like the unit was exhaling. The ladder was iron, old but solid, bolted to the inside of the hidden chamber. I couldn't see the bottom. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it down the hole. Concrete walls. The beam lit about 20 feet before it vanished into black. No obvious bottom. No smell. No sound. Just air, dry and stale. Like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I should have walked away. But I'd paid for this unit, which meant this was mine. Whatever was down there belonged to me now. I grabbed a wrench from the workbench and tucked it into my jacket pocket, just in case, and started climbing. The metal rungs creaked, but they held. 10 feet, 15, 20. The temperature dropped with every step until I was sweating with nerves but shivering from the cold. My boots touched concrete and I froze, letting the light sweep the room around me. It was a bunker. Square-shaped. No windows, no door. Just concrete walls lined with industrial shelving and steel cases. A single bulb hung from the ceiling by a frayed wire, long dead. The air smelled like leather, dust, and something faintly electric. To my left, a row of black plastic bins. Each was labeled in faded white marker. Hunter Kit, number 3. Eastern Variants. Photos. Verified entities, 1972 to 2004. Salt, silver, bone. To my right, maps. Dozens. Folded, pinned, some spread out across a drafting table. Most had red markers, handwritten notes, strange coordinates. A few had faded stains, dark brownish red. I opened one of the kits, and inside, wooden stakes, carved and old. A revolver with strange engravings along the barrel. Vials of liquid, blue, amber, green, each labeled in shorthand. A notebook with half the pages torn out. The rest, notes, field notes. Dozens of entries, all in jagged handwriting. June 18th, 1996, Utah. Type 2 mimic, female presenting. Notes: took over local librarian's life, Didn't feed for months. Finally cracked and drained a family of 4. Burned out the nest. No survivors. No backup. Still hearing it sometimes. In dreams. Not sure it's dead. I dropped the notebook and backed up. This was real. This was all real. I moved to the back wall, where a massive cork board had been bolted in place. Strings ran between Polaroids, clippings, and hand-scribbled notes. It was like stepping into the middle of an investigation, one that spanned decades. The photos were what got me. Each one was labeled with a name, age, and location. At first glance, they looked normal. People at parks, bars, schools, walking down the street. But the longer I stared, the more wrong they became. One man's shadow didn't match his pose. One girl had no pupils. Another guy had no reflection in the window behind him. And then there was the last photo. It was tucked in the bottom corner of the board, half covered by a faded receipt and a push pin jammed in sideways. No name, no age, no location. Just a black and white Polaroid of a man standing in front of what looked like a motel room. Number 6B. He wore a long coat, hands in his pockets, and was looking straight at the camera. His face was clear, but the moment you focused on it, it felt like your eyes slid away. I blinked, looked again. He was smiling. Too wide. It was wrong. I pulled it from the board. On the back, in smudged pencil, was, "Do not engage. Follow-up required. See file 6B. I looked around. There were no drawers, no filing cabinets, just more crates and bins. Eventually, I spotted a trunk tucked behind a tarp and a rusted folding chair. Heavy thing. Inside, rows of manila folders marked with codes and dates. I dug until I found 6B. The file was slim. The first page was a map. Tennessee. A motel circled in blue ink. Room 6B. The caption next to it. Same subject. Same face. 1983. 1996. 2009. 2022. Unconfirmed. Moving west. The next few pages were photos. Not the creepy kind. Just surveillance-style shots. Blurry zooms of the same man in different places. Different clothes. Always alone. Always looking toward the camera. Never aging. Then came the field notes. Typed. No header. No names. Encounter outside Motel 6B. Chattanooga outskirts. Male subject observed entering and exiting room without ever using a key. Same walk, same posture, same facial structure as 1996 incident, confirmed by 2 prior agents. 2 locals reported missing. Their cell phones pinged near the motel before going dark. Blood trace found in drain behind Unit 6B. DNA inconclusive. Local PD unaware. We pulled out before they could question. No viable way to stop him. Tracked him west, maybe using the train system. Rarely sleeps. Eyes glow under infrared. That was it. The file ended with a printed screenshot. A time-stamped security cam still from a train station somewhere in Kansas. The same man, same coat, same face, looking up at the camera, eyes faintly lit. My skin went cold. There were at least 20 other files like this in the trunk. I skimmed a few. Different creatures, different sightings. Some local. Riverside, Bakersfield. One said something about feral changelings near a rest stop on I-5. Another was just labeled Chatterbox and marked with a blood stain on the inside of the folder. But this one, this 6B thing, it wasn't just a random sighting. Whoever ran this place, they were watching him for decades. And then they stopped. No closure, no success, no confirmation. Just one last sighting 3 years ago. And then nothing. I stood there, holding that photo, and suddenly the whole bunker felt smaller, like the walls had moved an inch closer while I was reading. My phone buzzed. Low battery. I didn't like being down here anymore. I carefully put the file back, relocked the trunk, took one last look at the board. That photo, I shouldn't have pulled it off. I pinned it back in place, just like it had been. The man in the coat stared back. Crooked smile, cold eyes. Same door behind him. Room 6B. Same feeling in my gut. Like he was looking at me. I backed away, turned off the light, and climbed the ladder without looking down. I shut the unit, rolled the door down, locked it, even looped the old red tag back through the latch like that would somehow seal everything back inside. I knew it was stupid, but it made me feel better. The whole drive home, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Back at the apartment, I dropped my keys, kicked off my boots, and fell onto the futon. No lights, no dinner, just the silence and the leftover cold. It was too much. The tools, the files, the wall of faces. The man in that photo, standing in front of the motel door, looking like he knew something I didn't. I mean, it had to be a prank, right? Some elaborate setup? Like one of those immersive escape rooms for horror fans. But that didn't explain the age of the paper, or the dust, or the photo timestamp from 1983 printed on the back of that motel picture. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but sometime after the second hour of lying there with my heart pounding, I crashed hard. And I dreamed. Me standing in the storage unit with the door open, looking down into the hole. The ladder stretched longer than before, vanishing into pitch black. Something was moving down there, breathing. I woke up sweating. Late afternoon sun was bleeding through the blinds. For a few minutes, I just lay there, frozen, staring at the ceiling. Then I sat up, grabbed my backpack, and repacked it. Flashlight, wrench, power bank, granola bar, and bottled water. I tossed in some gloves this time too. I told myself I just wanted one more look, to see it again in the daylight. Maybe take a proper video. Something to prove to myself it had really happened. But I knew the truth. I wasn't done with it. And it wasn't done with me. By the time I got back to the storage lot, the sun was already starting to dip behind the old strip mall across the street. I parked around the side so no one would see me from the road. Unit 83 was still closed, still locked, still exactly as I'd left it. But now I had the key. I unlocked the latch, pulled open the door, and for a second, I half expected everything to be gone. The tools, the wardrobe, the cold air, like maybe I'd imagined it all. But it was there, just as I left it. The same heavy silence hit me the second I stepped inside. I pulled the door down behind me and clicked on the flashlight, walked straight to the wardrobe, opened the hidden panel, and stared down into the dark. I took a deep breath and started climbing. The ladder groaned, metal cold through my gloves, and I moved slower this time. I just wanted to see every detail clearly. I wanted to understand. When my boots hit concrete again, I turned in a full circle, letting the flashlight sweep the place. Same bunker, same wall of bins and crates, same map table, cork board, trunk in the corner. But this time, I didn't go for the files. I walked to the board. I stared at the photo of the man in front of Motel 6B. His coat looked old, like wool. His hands were still in his pockets. His shoes were polished, but there was something in his posture, not relaxed, but ready, like he just heard something behind the camera. I pinned it back exactly where it'd been, then turned toward the metal shelving along the far wall. Most of it held gear, kits, boxes labeled in shorthand I couldn't decode. One shelf had sealed cases filled with old camcorders, DV tapes, and thick black cords. I opened one of the tapes, and the label read, 6B, Daylight, Stationary Cam, 2009. I didn't have a way to play it. But there were at least 6 more tapes with the same code, some older, some marked no audio or do not watch alone. I moved on. There was another primary bin labeled Entity Logs, Classified, Primary Threats. I cracked it open. Inside, there were spiral notebooks, half-filled legal pads, printed email threads with most of the lines blacked out. I flipped through until something stopped me. A page near the back of one legal pad, sketched by hand, almost like a courtroom artist's drawing. The man from the photo. Only now, he had features. Wrong ones. Longer fingers, the mouth opened wider. Strange teeth. His eyes were gone. Just dark hollows, smudged like the ink had been rubbed after drawing them. Beneath it, written in pencil, "Smile does not move, only grows." I set the pad down carefully and turned to the final shelf. This one had just a single locked black box. On top was a note. "If found, do not act alone. See logbook Red A." Red A wasn't anywhere I could see. No shelf label. No box that matched. I stepped back and looked at everything again. This wasn't a workshop. It was a war room. And whoever had used it last, they were losing. I scanned the bunker one more time, slower this time, letting my eyes follow the edges, the seams, the shadows. There was something here I hadn't noticed, something I'd missed. In the far corner, past the ammo crates, past a stack of burlap sacks labeled bone dust, clean, there was a filing cabinet, a short one, wedged tight against the wall under an old coat rack as if someone had tried to hide it behind junk. The bottom drawer was dented, locked, but the top was already slightly open. I knelt down. Inside, just one thing. A red journal, leather cover, curled at the edges. No title, just a burn mark near the corner that looked like a branded letter, or maybe a symbol. The light caught it just enough for me to make out Red A. I sat down on the concrete floor and opened it carefully. The handwriting was tight, mechanical. No wasted loops or flourishes. This wasn't someone venting their feelings. This was documentation. a ledger. The first half was filled with creature profiles, names, types, weaknesses, classifications. Most I didn't recognize. But around the halfway point, a new heading was scribbled in darker ink. 6B, code, blackout. I turned the page. First sighting verified 1952, Missouri. Confirmed visual match to 1967, 1981, 2009. Same face, same clothing. No signs of age. Attempts to follow unsuccessful. Entity enters room 6B. Door closes. Exit never witnessed. There were location tags, all rural, all isolated, all motels with the same floor layout, same numbered door. Feeds discreetly, it read. Always leaves town before full investigation. Evidence suggests does not kill indiscriminately. Targets chosen. Patterns unclear. Then a list of names, cities, victims. All disappeared. It read silver ineffective, religious symbols ineffective. Subject maintains human appearance in daylight. Nighttime behavior unknown. No footage confirmed. Another page, then a sketch. Crude, pencil on paper. A figure in a coat, except the coat was drawn open, and underneath it wasn't flesh. It was segmented and rib-like. The chest was split open, almost like insect wings folded out from the center. Dozens of thin, clawed arms extended from the cavity. The caption beneath it chilled me. Final form observed. Hunter R. Whitlock, last seen 2009, Georgia. Presumed dead. This was it? This was the last entry. It read, tracked to roadside motel, room 6B. Confirmed subject still active. No exit observed. Waited 9 hours. Approached at 2:31 a.m. Knocked. Door opened. He was inside. Awake. Standing. Like he expected me. The writing got worse near the bottom. Slanted. Rushed. It read, I fired 3 shots into the chest. Point blank. Center mass. Subject did not fall. He smiled and said my name. The final sentence wasn't written. It was carved, pressed so hard into the paper the page beneath had nearly torn. It read, how did he know my name? That was it. I closed the journal and sat in silence. For a long time I didn't move, didn't think. My hands felt numb, and the concrete floor beneath me felt colder. There was no dramatic twist, no final answer, just a dead end with one terrifying truth. Whoever this monster hunter was, he failed. And the thing he was tracking, it's still out there. I sat there for what felt like an hour, the red journal heavy in my lap. I wasn't a monster hunter. I didn't know spells. I didn't even own a gun. But the idea of walking away, of knowing this thing was out there and doing nothing, that was worse. If I couldn't stop it, maybe I could do the next best thing. Figure out who it was going after next. And try to save him. I packed up the red journal, snapped a few more photos of the room and the cork board, and climbed back up the ladder. When I reached the top, I shut the false bottom and locked the wardrobe back in place. The air in the unit felt thicker now, like it knew what I'd seen. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my tiny kitchen table with the journal laid out in front of me, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. The names in the file were mostly first names only, no last names. Some just locations and ages. A lot of them were dated 1981, 1996, 2009, always spaced about 13 years apart, which meant if the last confirmed sighting was 2009, then 2022 was the next cycle. We were already in it. The sketch in the journal showed a motel door, room 6B. I checked online, figured it'd be a stretch, but maybe there was a connection. It took me 3 hours, but eventually I found it. A motel off the I-10, a few miles outside a small town in central Texas. Still had an active listing online. One of the photos showed the layout of the building. And there it was, room 6B. Same numbers, same exterior, same corner tree. My stomach dropped. I called the number on the website, and a woman answered. She sounded tired. I asked if someone was staying in room 6B, said I was doing some family history and was curious. She said no. That room was booked out long term. A man, quiet, paid in cash, been there 6 weeks. I asked for a name. She paused, said she couldn't share that. But then she slipped up, muttered something under her breath. That guy gives me the creeps. That was all I needed. I packed a bag, just essentials. Phone, flashlight, snacks, journal. Then I stopped myself. The silver hook. I didn't know what it was for, just that it was old, heavy, and carved with symbols I couldn't read. I threw it in anyway. What was I even gonna do? Knock on the guy's door? Tell him I knew he was a centuries-old monster and that, he should probably cut it out. No. But I could watch. I could wait. I could see if someone else showed up. And maybe, just maybe, I could figure out who this thing was going after. The drive took a day and a half. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Didn't post about it online. Just drove, checked into a cheap roadside inn a mile away, and waited. I parked across from the motel each night, using a pair of old binoculars I found in a thrift store on the way. Room 6B had the curtains drawn. Every night, between 2 and 3 a.m., the light came on. No one ever entered. No one ever left. But on the 4th night, a car pulled in around midnight. A woman stepped out. Young, probably early 20s. Long dark hair, backpack slung over one shoulder. She walked to the lobby, checked in, and was handed a key. 6A, right next to him. I watched her enter, door closed, light on. My hands started sweating. The night passed. Nothing happened. Next night, same routine. Light in 6B came on, then off. Nothing else. But on the 3rd night after she arrived, she came out to smoke. It was around 1:45 a.m. I saw her lean on the railing, staring off into the woods behind the building. She looked tense. Not scared exactly, just off, like she hadn't been sleeping well. I took a photo of her car, checked the plates, ran them through a public records database I paid $15 to access. Her name was Kelsey Romero, 23, from Phoenix. No criminal record, nothing weird, just normal. Which meant she fit the profile. The others in the Red A journal, they didn't seem like bad people, just unlucky. I drove back to the motel, heart pounding, sat in the dark and stared at the file. And then I did the one thing I told myself I wouldn't do. I drove to the motel, parked, got out, and I walked up to her room. I knocked. After a long second, the door cracked open. She looked through the chain, cautiously. "Yeah?" "Sorry," I said quickly. "My name's Ryan. Look, I know this is gonna sound insane, but I need to talk to you. Just give me 2 minutes, okay? If it sounds crazy, I'll leave." She didn't answer right away. Just stood there with her hand on the door, her eyes flicking from my face to the parking lot behind me. I could tell she was calculating whether to slam the door or scream. "Look, I'm not a creep," I added. "I swear, Look, I've been researching this place, room 6B. That did something. Her face twitched, a flicker of recognition, or maybe fear. The door opened another inch. "What about 6B? I pulled the photo from my jacket, the black and white Polaroid, faded at the corners but still clear. The man in the long coat, standing in front of her exact room number. I found this in a locked file. It was taken here. Same room, same building. There's a note on the back that says not to engage, that this guy, whoever he is, he shows up every 13 years. She looked at the photo. I could see the moment it landed, the way her posture stiffened. She glanced back inside, then quickly back at me. And then without warning, the hallway light above us buzzed hard and died. The fixture gave one final flicker and blinked out, leaving a faint electrical hum in the silence. Through the gap in her doorway, I could see her bedside lamp flicker, dim, then return to normal. She sucked in a breath. I didn't say anything, just stood there and let it settle. After a second, she stepped out and closed the door behind her, still wary. But something had shifted. "You've got 1 minute," she said. "Start talking." We sat on the low curb outside her room. She kept her arms folded, like she didn't know whether to punch me or run. I laid the photo flat between us on the concrete. "Your room is part of something that goes back decades," I said. "I don't have all the answers, but I found a bunker, literally, a hidden bunker, under a storage unit I bought last week. It belonged to someone who tracked things, creatures. This guy was the last one he wrote about." She said nothing, just stared at the Polaroid. The man's wide smile, the way the trees behind him seemed to ripple slightly, even in still print. "There were files," I went on. "Maps, case notes. Every 13 years, someone dies in or near room 6B. Always the same man. They called him Mr. Six." She finally looked up at me. "And you're what? Some kind of ghost hunter now?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm just a guy who bought a unit he shouldn't have. But I believe what I saw, and I think you're in danger." She looked away, chewing her cheek. The lamp inside her room flickered again. I heard scratching," she said. "Last night. Behind the wall. I thought it was rats or something, but the door to 6B, it's sealed. There's no way anything could get in there." I hesitated. There were scratches in that room before, in one of the old reports. Same place, I think. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I should just leave." I didn't argue. I just nodded. That's probably smart. She stared at the photo again, That same faded Polaroid, the man in front of room 6B, coat hanging past his knees, that too wide smile. Her eyes stayed on it longer this time. "You really think this guy's gonna come back?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. "I don't think he ever left." The lamp behind her flickered again. One hard pulse, like a dying heartbeat, then steadied. We both looked at the door to 6B. It was still sealed, still dark, but I could feel it. Like the hallway itself leaned in closer when she said the words. "I need to pack," she muttered. "I'm not staying another night." She stood up and moved toward the door. I followed her. "Can I help?" I asked. "At least until you're in your car?" She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob, still thinking, still cautious. Then finally, Yeah, fine. Just don't touch anything." Inside, the room looked normal, lived in. Clothes in a half-open suitcase, makeup bag on the sink, TV remote wedged between the bedspread and a wrinkled hoodie. But something felt very wrong. She moved quickly, started gathering shirts, her charger, while I stood by the door, eyes fixed on the connecting wall to 6B. It was quiet. Too quiet. And then something tapped once. Faint, like a fingernail brushing wood. She froze. I looked over. She'd stopped halfway through folding a jacket. The noise didn't come again. "You heard that, right?" I nodded. She zipped the suitcase and stood. "Okay, that's it. I'm out," she said. We were halfway to the door when the TV behind us turned on. No sound, just a blank screen with faint static bars drifting side to side, like water damage. A shape formed for a second, maybe a figure. Then it was gone. I unplugged it. The screen stayed on for 1 second longer than it should have. She looked at me. "Yeah, I am not sleeping in here again." We stepped outside. She locked the door with shaking hands and turned to me. "Okay, I'm gonna grab a coffee or something, drive until sunrise, maybe call my brother in the morning." I nodded, but I could feel the hairs on my neck rising. There was a man standing at the far end of the lot. He was perfectly still and facing us. He hadn't been there a second ago. "Don't look," I said. "Just get in the car." She turned away, froze. He was gone. No footsteps, no motion, just vanished behind the edge of the vending machines. She unlocked the driver door, and I stepped back. She paused. "Wait," she began. "What about you?" "I'll be fine," I said. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she got in, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine wouldn't start. First time, nothing. Second, just a sputter. Third, the headlights flickered once, then off. He was back. Closer now. Halfway across the lot. He wasn't walking. He was floating. Just a slow, steady glide. The lights overhead began to shut off one by one. Each bulb fizzed out in perfect rhythm, heading straight toward us, like someone hitting dominoes. With every one that died, the darkness got thicker. Not just darker, but thicker, like the shadows were crawling inward. Kelsey turned.
car, now. We ran?
I dropped the photo in the gravel. Didn't matter anymore. She fumbled with the keys, yanked the driver's side door open, and threw herself inside. I was right behind her, sliding into the passenger seat as she jammed the key into the ignition. Nothing. She swore under her breath and tried again. Still nothing. Outside, the last motel light above her door sputtered. Glass rained down. Now it was just us, the car, and the dark. And him? I looked up. He was closer now. Halfway across the lot, had become 10 feet. His face was still pointed right at us, though his head never moved. His eyes didn't blink. And his smile, that never changed. That wrong, too wide smile. Like he had all the time in the world. Kelsey. I know, she snapped, twisting the key again. This time the dashboard lights fluttered weakly. A pulse, then dead again. I was breathing too fast. My chest burned. The cold inside the car was worse than it had been outside, like the heater had flipped to reverse. And then I remembered. The hook. The silver hook with the symbols carved into it. The one from the bunker. I didn't know what it did. I didn't know if it would work. But it had been packed with salt, silver, and bone. I remembered that. And it was still in my jacket. I yanked it out, flipping the blade open. It wasn't sharp in the usual way. It looked ceremonial. Used, not crafted. The etchings were dull, worn from blood or time. Or both. Kelsey saw it and flinched. What the hell is that? I didn't answer. I just opened the door and got out. He was 5 feet away now. Still not moving fast, just steady. Like he was following a line nobody else could see. I raised the hook. His head tilted, just slightly. The smile stayed, but his glide, it stopped. It was small, barely a pause, but it was enough. I stepped forward, holding the thing out in front of me like a crucifix. My hand was shaking. Back off, I said. My voice barely came out. He didn't react, just floated there, watching. And then something flickered behind his eyes. A twitch. And the lights on the car flicked back on. Kelsey, I said, try it now. The engine turned over once, then again, and then roared to life. Headlights cut through the dark. The figure didn't flinch. He just turned his head the tiniest degree and looked straight into the beam. The smile dropped. I didn't wait. I ran back to the passenger side, dove in, and slammed the door. Go. She threw it in reverse so hard I thought the transmission would stop. We fishtailed, skidded, then slammed it into drive and took off down the road, gravel and dust flying up behind us. I looked back once. He hadn't followed. He was still standing there in the parking lot, long coat hanging still, one hand lifted like he was waving. And the lights behind him, the ones that had gone out, they stayed dark. We didn't speak on the drive, just kept checking the rearview mirror over and over. I dropped her off at a diner 20 miles out. Bright lights, other people. Told her to stay inside until morning. She didn't argue. When I got home, I moved fast, grabbed clothes, food, anything I could carry. But just before I left, I spotted it. A scrap of paper, dead center on the kitchen counter. 5 words in thick, uneven ink. It read, "The light won't save you." I didn't stop to think. I didn't look around. I just ran out, slammed the door, and drove. We didn't go home after that. We met at the storage unit the next day. And we have been in the bunker for 3 months. We keep the salt lines fresh. Every door, every vent, every crack. I check them twice a day, sometimes 3. Twice now, we found footprints just outside the salt. Never closer. She took the side room, just a cot and a light. She doesn't talk much, but she hasn't laughed. And that tells me everything I need to know. We live off canned food, bottled water, and paranoia. We've got every file spread out across the table. Every photo, every old report. We have memorized the map. Red pins for sightings, black pins for kills. 1 white pin for us. We're the only survivors so far. We don't sleep well. She keeps her boots on. I sleep with a hunter's revolver under my pillow. Not that it would help. It didn't help him. And every night, just after midnight, the motion light above the steel hatch clicks on for half a second. Just once. Like a reminder. We don't talk about it. We just keep researching, planning, preparing. Because we got lucky once. And that's all it was. That was not a plan. That was a fluke. So now we work. She scans case files. I trace old sightings, build timelines, check names. We pin everything to the wall. Hotel registries, death reports, power outages, police calls that never made the news. And we've started to notice patterns. He always moves before the 13th year ends. Always changes names, changes cities. But the same face, the same grin, and the same door. 6B. I don't know if we can stop him. I don't think we can. But maybe we can get in the way. Last week, we found a case from 1970. Arkansas motel. Same layout. Housekeeper vanished. No body. Room sealed. A photo turned up in the same file. Same man. Same coat. Same smile. We circled the next target on the map. It's only 6 months away. But this time, we'll be there first. We've learned more now. And sure, yeah, the odds are still against us. But we know to stay in daylight, to never sleep near the door, to bring salt, silver, and real cameras, not phones. We don't know why, but digital doesn't catch him right. Film does. We keep our bags packed. We stay off main roads. She's better with people, so she handles check-ins. I handle the maps, the gear, the exits. We don't try to be heroes. Just fast, quiet, sharp enough to spot the pattern before the thing in the coat shows up. We're not winning, but we're gonna save who we can.